afternoon, and good evening to wherever you are in the world. We are back once again on Mondays with RCI TV for a brand new championship, taking a mini British GT theme. Snetterton plays host to round four tonight, just under 4.80 kilometers in length, with 12 turns. GT3 lap record currently held by Marvin Kirchhofer with a 146.116. Don't think the drivers are going to be getting too close tonight with the weather that is on your screen currently. I'm your lead commentator for tonight, John Dalton. Alongside me is Jesse Lee with Stewie behind the cameras. As always, welcome everyone.
Welcome indeed. It's going to be an interesting couple of races here tonight, and that's right, couple of races back to the 30-minute format, two 30-minute races. In fact, qualifying sets the grid for both of those rounds here tonight, and nobody was getting close to the McLarens at the top of the grid for maybe a couple of reasons. Reason number one, the racetrack, the start of practice was dry, and it progressed into a sort of a wet affair. And now the interim between the end of practice and the beginning of qualifying, it's dried out just a little bit. The track's damp. It's going to make it difficult, John. There's going to be a decision at some point in these 15 minutes these drivers have to make. Certainly now on wets, making a banker lap, but at some point, I reckon we're going to be switching to dries.
Yeah, absolutely so, Jesse. I'd agree. I mean, the forecast for the next kind of 30 minutes, which would, of course, take us way past qualifying, is cloudy. Track is currently damp. Air temperature of 18 degrees translates to a track temperature of 22. So we may see it drying out ever so slightly, as the man on the screen we just had, Christopher Streppen, of course, last round winner, taking a dominating victory, electing for a set of single slick Pirelli tyres to carry him all the way up to the end in very mixed conditions at Donington Park. Jordan Daly, of course, came in second after qualifying 28th out of 29 cars. And finally, Andy Boardman took the bottom step of the podium, split two. Once again, Stan van der Kolen with an epic performance to take the win from Mike Redford and George Barr in third. But more, of course, on the championship points later. And a very different scene we have in the cinematics, Jesse. It looks lovely and dry. I'm sure all of the drivers would love to experience this kind of track right now.
Yeah, they certainly would, wouldn't they? This is it's an interesting day here at Snetterton simply because it's already down to greasy. Those cars that were out there potentially thinking about running a banker lap on the wet tire just to get something on the board. If you haven't left pit lane, though only a few cars have yet to leave pit lane, you might even consider abandoning this lap. The track greasy, there's no reason to be out there, but everybody so far out there soldiering on and attempting to continue on to do this lap. I probably wouldn't do that myself, but still getting something on the board better than nothing, as the track has gone from damp to greasy now officially, and it's only going to improve from here. Certainly in 12 minutes time we could be looking at a fast track. I don't think we'll get to optimum, could end up being fast track though.
Yeah, I think we'll at least see a little bit of dry running, of course, flicking over to greasy very quickly already. And it's, one of those things that's only just going to dry out all the time. So you want to time your laps to kind of be finishing up, should we say, when the clock hits 1 or 2 seconds to go. So you're on the best track possible. But running on board right now with Nico Kumpu and the number 256 McLaren GT3 Evo, of course, coming down the what is essentially the back straight here, the Bentley straight towards the corners of Brundle and Nelson. Very tricky technical section of the track. You've kind of got to trail the brake all the way through Brundle before standing on. Even harder for Nelson to get the car pitched in. Be very careful of the anti-cut curbs now. Be very brave through the bomb hole. Road dips away and it sucks the car through on the camp before the long drag around Coram towards the final corner. You've got to be careful not to understeer too wide. You do upset your run into the last corner, which will be very detrimental to your corner exit towards the finish line. Nico Kumpu goes. You've got to get a very clean run out of the last corner. You've got to maximize every little bit of speed you can. And Nico Kumpu with a banker lap on the board of a 151.1. Although you can see him struggling, Jesse, with some steering inputs. The car wants to wash wide. A little bit of oversteer in places. Maybe not 100% with the car at the moment.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect anybody to feel 100% with the car or the racetrack right now. The racetrack's changing. The car's moving around a little bit more, of course, as well. It's not ideal, but it's the conditions that they are having currently. And also, none of these drivers probably know about split two's good fortune, actually, but they will, if they are aware of that, they will be muttering under their breath ever so slightly. Speaking of split two, we are going to try and bring you the highlights of both races in split two, continuing the tradition of the season, given the shine to the split two drivers. Quite curious how their race is going to turn out. Of course, it's not always guaranteed. There always is a chance of weather in these kind of events, it seems like. And today, obviously, very mixed between the two. The servers are set up identical, but ACC, the way the weather works is you could get any particular min max or anywhere in between on that sort of slider, and it's up to the server itself of what they get. It's not directly set by the event managers. That's why it's so very different. I'm curious, and I worry about them having dry sessions in split simply because would that mean maybe it's going to swap back the other direction? I guess we will see. Martin Ulrich on the provisional pole, the McLeod Racing Team, the 741, setting the pace at a 50.262. That's good enough thus far and way out in front of everybody else. But again, with these improving conditions, it's only going to continue to get quicker.
Absolutely. So, Jess, and we spoke to Martin Ulrich over the weekend with the World Tour, of course, going to Valencia for round one. Found the BMW had no real kind of front end bite at Valencia, but it certainly seems to have changed fortune here at Snetterton. The balance of the car looking much better, using all of the inside curb there, upsetting the car, nearly throwing himself very wide. You can use a lot of the inside curb on the right hander they just passed through. I believe that's Williams before heading out onto the Bentley Straight. Can really tuck it over the kind of paved section of the curb as well to get an even better run. Jordan Daly, last week's man with the biggest gain, of course, qualified all the way at the back of the grid, nearly on the final row in P28. Managed to get himself up to P2, so he's a man to certainly keep your eye on. And Bill Roberts, this time again in the Kaiju Racing McLaren provisional pole sitter, Jesse. He's got some backup, I think, in the form of Jake Boswell today, who are running identical cars, so be very careful on the broadcast for that one as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting too. Both those drivers are capable of putting up numbers. Jedi Jake Boswell, known for avoiding accidents and almost like a Jedi, they can see and use the Force to get around them. Hopefully not a problem here today, but it is a lot of cars still. 30 plus are going to be on track here in split number one, and it is Snetterton, a place with a lot of choke points, a lot of opportunity, especially in sector one, to get it all wrong. The amount of times that I've been sent off and sent other people off in Montreal, well, it's a number too high to really remember. A couple of cars still not on the board with a time yet. Vulture Rybecki, one of those cars that you would expect to be doing pretty well, certainly inside the top 10, but the CLR Aston hasn't set a time, but they may be about to here on the dry tires. Will be somewhat representative, or maybe not, as that was not a particularly strong lap in these freezing conditions. Slightly surprised by that, I'd say.
Yeah, Rybecki, like you say, is a driver we usually see up the field a little bit for the Connection Loss Racing, and teammate Martin Lawrence all the way down in P21 at the moment as well with the BMW, the number 404, the traditional number for the Connection Loss Racing guys. But we're right on board at the moment with Martin Ulrich for the McLeod Racing Team as he heads up towards the latter half of the lap. Long drag down Bentley Straight, might see a little bit of drafting before breaking into Brundle. Keep it very tight on the curb, flick it back to the right for Nelson, and this is going to be how brave you can be through the bomb hole. Of course, you've got to really tuck the car into the curb. Don't let it wash too wide because there is a very bumpy exit, and then straight over the kind of paved area of the curb you do have grass, so it's a very old school circuit in its nature, grass and gravel kind of everywhere, typical of the British tracks. Using the torque of the BMW there in gear 2, coming out of the last corner to propel himself to the line. Martin Ulrich currently P10. 0.860 seconds to gain. He does make a very big gain there, Jesse. 149 flat provisional pole at the moment for the BMW driver.
You don't really see that a whole lot, a completely flat lap time. We normally just respect a flat lap time as something with a 0 in the first decimal place most of the time, but no, that is exactly a 149, an absolutely immaculate lap. But again, unlikely to stand for the final 5 minutes. But Ulrich right now putting themselves back on top. You got to be out there to keep up with the track conditions, not necessarily to keep up with, the changes necessarily, but to keep up with how it feels. Because the track, as it changes, it does feel different. And if you stay in the pits for a few laps, waiting for the track to improve, what's actually going to happen is you're not going to have the knowledge to go quick because you're never going to be able to go at full pace in conditions like this. Pole position changing hands a lot. Aaron Trout set the second quickest lap and then got bumped by Christoph Streppen and then got bumped by Daly. And now Alaska up on pole position, a 48.487. Good enough for that position right now. Shelgren goes P3 as several cars going off the racetrack now, diving down the pit lane, making the changes for the final 5 minutes of qualifying.
It's going to be a very frantic last 5 minutes. I think John Aracer with a big gain there. P18 to P8. Everybody forever improving. Tobias Lang now for the Limitless Speed drivers. Number 94, McLaren comes across the line. Provisional second place on the grid. McLaren's looking very confident here, but Velasquez BMW, along with Ulrich, looks like it could be a very good contender, along with Andy Boardman. He was sat just inside the top 10 in practice. One of the very few Ferraris we have here tonight. The only other sister Ferrari essentially being Keller, all the way down in P13 at the moment, but he's just been hustled down to P14. So I think it's going to be a very frantic final 4 minutes. We saw the stream of cars coming out of the pit lane as Tobias Lang crossed the line. So it's going to be, frantic times being drilled in. You see the gaggle of cars in Sector 1, Jesse Lee. We're going to have to be keeping up very quickly with all of these times coming through.
Certainly is, and this is the big crunch here. You don't want to miss your lap. The laps are the time's ticking down, and the laps that you're able to complete are also ticking down as well. So you can't afford to make a mistake here because each lap is going to probably have the opportunity to be better than the last. Ashton Chat, obviously a mate of Daly's and no stranger to us here at RCI, says, can't wait to start racing with you guys. Still a few weeks off yet. Ash, Daly has kept me in the loop of your progress in the simulator as well, and I await your debut as well. Speaking of debut, Harry Conway comes back to Mondays and sets the 6th quickest lap here today, and that is pretty good. That's the first life we've seen out of the number 3 R Lamborghini thus far. If they can keep that up. Everybody chasing Velasquez up in front, now sitting at a 47.995 as the bar continues to be pushed lower with just about 2.5 minutes to play. Just enough time for a couple more laps, John.
Yeah, certainly got time just for a few more. Of course, a 1:48 roughly, so you've got at least 2 more in the bag if you can find a little bit of clear air. Of course, Jake Boswell across the line now. Big gain from P30 up into P7. We've got Sven Kunas back this week as well for Last Turn Motorsport down in P29. Aaron Jackson for Kaiju Racing currently in P29 as well, near the back of the grid there. He's got Martin Lawrence just ahead of him with a very small margin, and I didn't realise, but Martin Lawrence is actually in a BMW M6. I thought he was, of course, Jesse, in a M4, but of course, Martin Lawrence, we know, is a big fan of the M6, especially at these British tracks where the bot was ever so slightly in its favour. Just post 1.9, should we say, through the 1.8 update was very strong indeed, and the track, top right-hand side, Jesse, just turned to green.
Yep, green, of course, it means that there is no rubber on the racetrack, but it's no longer wet. Greasy, oh my goodness! Aaron Jackson for Kaiju Racing comes over the bomb hole and nearly wipes out, but they save it. And what else they've saved is their ability to run another lap, because if they crashed right there, it would have been qualifying over for them. The only thing that Aaron Jackson hasn't saved is those pair of trousers.
Yeah, very Code Brown moment there, and Aaron Jackson does improve up into P25 from P29, so a good little improvement there. Probably still a little bit more in the time if he can keep it together in the bomb hole. And now this is going to be the frantic stream of cars coming through. Tobias Lang, your first man across the line, shortens his run all the way to the pit wall with a P3. Christoph Verstappen, next car through, I believe, on an outlap, ready to start his final lap as well. Jake Boswell shuffled already down to P13 from the provisional P7. He was on just a lap ago. We got Ted Edwards ahead of him as well. Boswell P14 at the moment, crosses the line up into P6. A great gain there, and Phil Roberts just a couple of cars behind in the sister 225 as well.
Jake Boswell, he took some time off from sim racing, had some health issues he needed to deal with, then just got busy with life. Don't we all, John, really? And now back into the sim rig. He was getting back into it in the previous couple of weeks. I'm going to tell you something about Jedi Jake Boswell. You can take him out of the race, but you can't take the race out of him. He's showing you, even with a break, he is still absolutely lethal parking the car inside the top 10. Track went from green to fast. Everybody out there frantically on the racing surface. A couple of cars in the pit lane. They will take no further part. You can see the white P next to the timing and scoring pylon. That tells you that they're in the pit lane. They will not be able to improve upon their laps and almost certainly will be shuffled near the back. Alaska at the top, but for how long? Andy Boardman comes to the line and will set the quickest time, a 47.085 for Andy Boardman, and they have set the measurement of which everybody else will have to live up to here.
Yeah, Andy Boardman, provisional pole sitter, although don't discount any of these cars in the next queue. Last week's race winner, of course, Christopher Streppen in 747 Heart of Racing, being shuffled down even more. Currently residing P24. Has he got enough in the bag? He hasn't. P4 for your last week's race winner. Keller crosses the line, cements himself in third. Martin Ulrich up into the pole position, snuck on in. Phil Roberts can manage a P10. Jordan Daly currently P18 for the Triple R. P19 even being shuffled down for Evan O'Day. Ted Edwards into P20 in the number 8 Race Ventura portion. Daly almost getting a bump draft here from another McLaren behind him to the line. The 197 is going to be providing a little bit of a slipstream here for Nico Kumpu behind, and Kumpu follows him all the way to the line. Daly P8, Kumpu P5. We've got a couple more cars, I think Tobias Lang and Harry Conway to come through yet, and Harry Conway comes through in P14. But your pole sitter locked in, should I say, Martin Ulrich in the BMW, as we've got Andy Boardman in second, Falaska in third, Keller fourth, Nico Kumpu fifth. Last week's race winner, of course, Christopher Streppen in sixth, Donna Racer seventh, Jordan Daly in P8, Thomas Ehrentraut in P9, and his teammate Hartman in P10. We've got a few names outside the top 10 that I wasn't really expecting, including Tobias Lang. Was definitely expecting him up higher, Jesse.
Yeah, there's a group of Kaiju and Triple R cars that are just well out of where I would normally see them. You got Shelgren outside the top 10 and Jake Boswell, Harry Conway, Grim Lilith, Phil Roberts, all of those cars just slightly out of position from where you might assume they would be. And that's quite odd. Martin Lawrence down in 26th place, of course, is in the M6. Well, we've just about got to the halfway point in the championship, John, and there's still everything left to play for. Nobody has fully seized control of the championship. Why don't you take us through the standings for the pro split?
Everybody's super close in the pro split, of course, Jesse. Christopher Streppen, your man at the top with 129 points. Andy Boardman, just 9 points behind on 120. Bias Lang with 114, and his teammate chasing the rear, Thomas Arntrout, is in 111. Sorry, Nicholas Keller joint with Thomas, Nico Kuizma on 92, Daly on 84, Martin Ulrich, your pole sitter for today on 82, looking to bag a lot of points from the Snetterton double header. Phil Roberts on 80, and Shelgren, a late joiner to the season, but already on 57 points. Now, rounding down the board, we go to Roskam, joint with Mikov and Manzo, all on 56 points apiece. Grim Lilith just behind on 54. Luca Falaska on 52, tied with Nico Kumpu. Andre Hartman with 44. Richard Phillips on 36. Chris Downing, 34. And our very own RCI Les Stevenson on 29 points. Now, rounding just outside your top 20, Matt Stevens on 26. Aaron Jackson and Harry Conway tied with 20 points apiece. Tie of the Toms with Tom Watts and Tom Shipston, both on 18. And then another tie with John Eraser and Matthew Kingston Lee, both on 17 points apiece. Rybecki on 16, John Schultzer on 12, and De Jong on 6. Long old championship board here today as well. Sven Kunas with 3 points. Sarberio Ted Edwards with one. Barber, Lawrence, Van der Kolen, and Boswell are yet to score in the championship. Everybody else with a dash against their name has unfortunately signed out and will take no further part.
This championship's been quite interesting indeed, and I believe there has been some mix-ups in Split 2. We told you at the beginning of this championship, we try to bring you some of the updates of how things have gone. Well, when we left you at Donington Park a week ago, it looked like Vanderkula had won that race, but I'm being told that Mike Redford now has won that race due to a penalty for the winning car, John.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, the results here tonight are kind of awaiting stewarding results. We have no live stewards with us on Mondays, which is why you see a few familiar names down on the grid actually competing. Obviously, Phil Roberts, Jake Boswell, to name two. It's great to give the stewards a little bit of time off now and again. And of course, they will go through any post race penalties after the event. Do remember to get your submissions in if you do feel like you have been hard done by. And while we're talking to stewards, of course, if you are interested in getting involved with us here at RCI, we do have a vacancies channel in our Discord. You can find a link to the Discord below, as well as all of our social medias down there with our partners. Of course, we can never have enough stewards on board, and especially for the love of the community, giving up some free time just to go through a few incidents on, who did what to who. And, fantastic to see a great mix of cars. And just spotted another livery for Kaiju, should we say, on the left-hand side. Grim Lilith Mercedes, and a very Vauxhall-esque livery from the 90s, Jesse.
Yeah, whenever he showed it to me, Phil Roberts, that is, who designs the liveries, whenever he showed it to me at first, I got a sneak peek, of course, before it was done. I didn't quite place it until I actually saw the voxel it was meant to be on, and then it all came flooding back. I don't know if memories have a taste, but every time I get hit in the face with nostalgia that hard, I feel like I taste 1998.
Yeah, absolutely. So a taste of the 90s with all the Kaiju cars on the grid. Of course, you'll be familiar with Aaron Jackson's livery to any of you that were, into the 90s BTCC. And very interesting start here, Jesse Lee. We see a few of the wipers starting to go on these cars, which
Oh,
means
it's
it
raining.
is, of course, raining. And I'm seeing a few yellow sidewall tires, and this is the worst timing. The rain came down as soon as the countdown hit 0, so it's too late to dive back into the pits to take wet tires. But it's Finkunas at the back, no yellow Pirelli stickers on his Lamborghini, Jesse. Finkunas is on wet, and if this track changes very fast, he could set to gain quite a lot. Of course, 30-minute sprint tonight, no mandatory stop at all, so you do come down the lane, you're going to be hemorrhaging a lot of time. Keep your eye on Svinkunas at the back.
Well, I got some interesting news for all the drivers. They know, of course, this is a 30-minute sprint to the finish here today, and it is starting out with rain on the racetrack. It's going to progressively get harder. It's going to develop right near the end of this race. It's going to develop into medium rain. This is light rain we're experiencing now. It's going to continue to intensify all the way into medium rain at the checkered flag. For anybody who has put on the slick Pirelli P0 tires, they are going to be in a world of trouble here today. Quite clearly, the call is the wet tires, so that is going to be very detrimental for their race. This is almost for them a write-off. You're never, especially at Snetterton, in a 30-minute race, you're never going to be able to come back from that. Doesn't matter how good you are.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? No matter how many, lap times you can drill in faster than the next guy, you're going to be hemorrhaging at least 30 plus seconds of time for a tire service. And some news from the Split 2. Split 2 race 1 is going to be dry, starting fast and no rain on the radar. So Split 1 guys going to be very envious of Split 2 when they watch back the highlights that we should be bringing you later on. And quite a lot of dry tyres in the field, Jesse. It's going to be a super interesting start as these guys begin to feel out grip. Of course, pit lane is closed on the formation lap. It only opens once the race goes to green.
Yeah, it sure does. The timing of the rain was actually very poor indeed because you can grid up and then change tires. The only problem is the rain started inside the final 10 seconds. Inside the final 10 seconds, you're under starter's orders and you cannot jack the car back up and put
Right, we have
tires on
some
the
good
car. So
conditions.
that's
Watch
exactly
out
what's
for cars
happened. That's why
exiting
so
into the
many
clear
cars
coating.
have been caught off guard by this. It's just incredible. There are so many cars. I'm seeing a ton of cars out there on the dry tire. You can tell the difference, of course, because the dry tire has a yellow sidewall, the yellow Pirelli lettering. The wet weather tire does not have the yellow sidewall. It's a completely black sidewall on those. Several of the lead cars, a lot throughout the pack, have taken the dry tire. I just wonder, can you stick it out here for 30 minutes in conditions that are going to depreciate over the time? I guess we're going to have to find out. We're about to start, John.
Gonna have to find out indeed. I mean,
I'm
track
so
surface
nervous.
already damp, and these guys on dry tires are going to be struggling. Cars 2x2 up to the speed limit already, waiting for the green flag to drop. Keep your eye top middle of the screen for when the red changes to green, and that's when we're underway. It should be any moment now, and it is. Here we go, just under 30 minutes on the clock to go. Who will be your biggest movers and shakers down into turn one? Everybody goes side by side. 2 into 1 doesn't go. Look at the chaos already. We've got cars sideways in the mid pack. I think everybody's avoided each other, but as you said, Jesse, the chaos comes in the pinch point of the Montreal hairpin, and a big one at the back of the field. A couple of cars caught up in there. Looks like maybe one of the dropping the Hammer Racing car. We've got number 42 and 33 at least. We're going to have to find out what happened there. Everybody tiptoeing around the kind of first section. Still people side by side in the mid pack, Jesse. Too wide. Nobody wider than that, but a move at the front. Andy Boardman looks like he's up the inside of Martin Ulrich into the braking zone of Agostini. A few cars off into the grass at Agostini as well. We're going to have to see who is entailed in that. Somebody stopped in the middle of the circuit. Everybody well avoided as they rejoin through the inside lane. A couple of stragglers at the back, of course, catching up. Just want to see where Sven Kunas has managed to get himself to, and another car off through the Williams section as well. Jesse, this is chaos. We've got cars off left, right and centre. So many people on dry tyres. I'm expecting the pit lane to get very busy in the next minute or so.
Probably is indeed. Nicholas Keller was the car sitting backwards at the exit of Agostini, but now as they work the Bentley straight and down into Brundle and Nelson, it's all about getting single file. You could have made it work too wide around the majority of this racetrack until this point, but now this is the major choke point. You have to be single file, and still some cars not doing that, going too wide through Nelson that time. That's a brave endeavor on a completely dry racetrack. We're working a damp racetrack right now. I can imagine many cars are going to be coming in. Will Andy Boardman do so? He handled the first lap so very well and took the lead of the race. Martin Ulrich has had an absolute mare of a start, almost outside the top 10. The pole-sitting car is in 9th place right now. That's how bad of a lap one it was for that car. And in fact, Ulrich down to the pit lane. We know they were on dries. They're in almost immediately. They're joined by Tom Shipston. I thought I saw, yes indeed, several more cars coming in, getting it done. And it's Kaiju on Kaiju right here. Very interesting. Boswell and Roberts side by side. Identical liveries, different numbers, of course, as they race each other into Montreal. And they're going to go through Palmer. And have they settled it out? Yes, but only just.
Only just indeed, and we don't want to see what we saw last time. Of course, Kaiju on Kaiju friendly fire action. Movement down the pit lane includes Martin Ulrich, Tom Shipston, Matt Stevens, Manzo, Rybecki, Falaska, Keller and Barber all electing to take a pit stop in the 30-minute sprint. Of course, this can only be for wet weather tyres. Looking at the forecast at the top right, Jesse, it's going to get heavier in the next 10 and heavier again in the next 30. So we'll see how the track evolves. And this is all the bumping and barging. John Eraser into one of the limitless speed drivers. Daly forced off the road by Keller's Ferrari. By the looks of it, he managed to get back on, just about bring it up in time for the Montreal hairpin. But very scary scenes indeed. I'm going to flick through a few more race replays here. We've got Falaska and Verstappen side by side. Down into Palmer, a little rub, a little twitch. Both drivers keeping it on the track, and I think just to the right of the shot was the big one, as you said there, Jesse. Not sure how Stewart's going to fare on this one. If they get any reports, it's going to be a chaotic evening, should we say.
Well, I'm just going to say, for Jordan Daly's sake, that was probably a championship saving save. Daly's not too far out of this champ. He has a shot at it, but he's got to make up points, and he can't have a single bad race from here on out. And that save through the wet grass was absolutely immense. Got the car back onto the racetrack. Absolutely no panic from him. And he, again, inside the top 5, that's exactly where he needs to be. You saw the BMW there of Martin Lawrence getting completely sideways coming through the final corner complex of Murray's, and that's sort of the conditions that you have. Even if you have the treaded Pirelli tire, the wet weather tire, this is less than ideal. You're still slip sliding around. There's no insurance of grip out there, and also too, we're getting to the point in the race where we may see puddles. The 127 off of the racetrack, a huge drama for them as well. It's not been the race for Rybecki, and they have reset to the pit lane. Now, is this, oh, that's a failure. That's a hardware failure. Something has gone wrong on Vocher Rybecki's 127 Aston.
Yeah, it looks like the wheelbase kind of disconnect, went dead straight in the middle of a corner where, of course, the driver would be turning left to try and reach the apex, even in these wet weather conditions. So very strange indeed. Sven Kunas, we said earlier on, was, of course, on the wet weather tyre in a Kaiju car sideways. That's Aaron Jackson again, very well held through the Williams section of Oggies and Williams there between the two corners, avoided all drama. But Sven Kunas, of course, on the wet tyre from the beginning. He's managed to gain his way up into P19 after starting in P30. And look at the spray on the windscreen, Jess. You can tell there's a lot of water on the circuit already. You can see a few puddles, as you said, beginning to form along the Bentley Straight. So these dry tyre guys aren't going to be lasting much longer, I feel. We're going to have probably a very busy pit lane, I'd say, in the next 5 to 10 minutes.
Well, I usually agree with the chat, and I certainly do on this occasion. Carnage and mayhem is the sentiment in chat, and I would absolutely agree. That's what happens when you get mixed weather conditions, and that's certainly what happens when you pack 30-plus pro drivers in split one, all at the track at the same time. That was a synchronized spin. That was the CLR car going off. I believe that was Rybecki's car. That was the very first incident in turn number 1. They continue to have issues. I would love if we could find the incident into Agostini, or sort of off Agostini, if you will. There was a blue car involved up near the front of the field. And oh no, Harry Conway has been off the racetrack. A little bit of contact there perhaps. Has Boswell and Phil Roberts there. Phil Roberts gets through. Jake Boswell looking for a way through Harry Conway, who had gained a spot or two off the initial start, now finds themselves under attack, under fire in that Triple R Lamborghini. And he's going to let Jake Boswell through, and just about saving himself after a scary moment here in Sector 1.
Yeah, the Kaiju car getting lent on massively by the Triple R car of Harry Conway, of course, through the hairpin of Montreal. I'm not sure if we're going to see a replay here. This is the big one.
Oh,
yeah,
the
down
blue car
into Agostini. That's Nicholas Keller out on the grass, along with Luca Falasca, and then one of the Limitless speed driver cars around in the middle of the corner as well. Just want to bring your attention, Jesse, Martin Ulrich currently down in P23, fastest lap of the race, stolen it away from Andy Boardman. Track has officially reached the wet status, and I think a lot of these dry guys are going to be struggling big time. John Eraser looks very confident through the bomb hole. He's on a set of wet tires. If you see Stewie cycling through the HUD and wondering what we're looking at, look to your bottom right hand side of your screen. You can see a grayed out tire kind of HUD overlay in the middle. It does tell you what tire compound they're on. So John Eraser dominating the guys behind on the dry tires. A flash of the lights from Tobias Lang saying, I want to get a move on here, although Tobias is on dries, John Eraser on wets. This lap is going to evolve very differently. Of course, the temperature in the dry tires fades away to see how much more confident John Eraser is through the first corner. Car looks much more stable. Tobias Lang loses a little bit, but gains on the brakes into the Montreal hairpin. It's very strange to see indeed. A little bit of a wiggle from all the cars behind. Everybody kind of following in this train pack mentality, all on dries behind and being told in their ears. And he still seems very competent, Jesse, even on the dry tyre. You know, John Eraser isn't exactly pulling away. He's got aspects of the corner where he looks more confident, but in other areas, not so much in the confidence region as well. Just look on the brakes. It looks like the dry tyre brakes are a hell of a lot better than the wets here.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. John Eraser seemed to have an advantage entering all these corners, but apparently doesn't have an advantage exiting the corners. You can see just how much Lang backs up to him in corner entry, but John Razor just going off essentially the wide line used there, not able to break up the car through the middle of the corner. Oh my goodness, a bucking Bronco right there, as they're going to end up side by side again. Thomas Ehrentraut not giving it up. A little bit of shoulder hip checking hockey action for you here at Snetterton as they do. Calmer heads prevail, single file through Brundle and Nelson's, but only just. Somehow John Razor on the correct tire, losing spots. And I will tell you, I have no idea how Lang and company up there just inside the top 5 or just outside are doing what they're doing in these weather conditions on that dry tire. It's actually quite miraculous indeed. Moving back up front, Andy Boardman enjoys a 1.5-second lead on this battle. Ivo Kumpu has second place. Christoph Streppen would like to take it away. Christoph Streppen, of course, your championship leader, trying to extend that gap a little bit here today. It's been uncomfortable thus far, but looking to go the long way around Montreal. That is so often a losing proposition, and it is again in this instance. He's going to regroup. He's got to do something, though. He can't just follow Kumpu. Kumpu's not going to let him have it, but he's got to do something different.
Absolutely, and I think this is the incident down in to Agostini that we saw with the limitless speed driver being turned around. Looked like a kaiju on limitless speed drives, possibly Ulrich there. Let's have a look, see what else we are finding. Falaska, this is in the number 32, I beg your pardon, it's not Ulrich. Let's see, brakes for Agostini, turns in, there's, no, it is Falaska in the background. This is Ulrich at the front in the BMW, so not sure where Falaska's BMW ended up spearing from, but Nicholas Keller definitely involved in that one, there's no doubt about that at all. 741, just want to turn your attention to Martin Ulrich. Look at the amount of clean air he has, Jesse. He's got, you know, good 3 to 4 corners before he even catches this kind of snake of cars going through. He's on, obviously, a set of fresh, wet tyres. The rain is getting heavier in the next 10 minutes and the next 30 as well. As we see John Racer getting shuffled ever more down the grid, tries to find a gap, a little bit of contact there, a flash of the lights, maybe a little bit of a displeasure on that one. I think that would be John Racer on Shelgren we just witnessed, and now Grim Lilith has found a way through. I'm not sure what's happening here, Jesse. All these cars on dry tyres. John Racer maybe just struggling to either switch the wets on, maybe he's overheated them provisionally in the beginning, maybe they're slightly over or under pressured, but the Racer not looking happy in the 699.
Well, John Racer just needs to be a little bit more patient, and he's going to get these spots. This rain's going to pick up, and as much as these drivers out on dries deserve the plaudits for being able to drive these cars in this condition like this, it's not going to last forever. As the rain continues to pick up intensity, there's going to be more pooling on the racetrack. It's only going to get worse. So John making moves like that is just giving these other drivers ammunition to fire in post-race stewarding reports for making contact when it was unnecessary. So driver like John Racer has way too much talent to waste it to lose spots and penalty reports, and he's on the right tire. He has the right strategy. Whatever's going on with the car, that's by the by. It will equalize at some point. There's no way these drivers on the dry tire have this pace, but I think, or have this pace until the end of this race. But it is amazing that they have stuck to this strategy. I don't think any of these guys are going to come down pit lane. I think they're going to grin and bear it here, and they're going to tiptoe at some point. But here it is again. John Racer in the same corner, going wide again. Is that obvious that he keeps going wide in? Time after time, the 699 car not making the corner, and now letting more people through. Frustrating for John Racer. You can understand why he was trying to make moves whenever he had early possible convenience because of this. Oh, a little bit of a hip check there from Harry Conway. Bill Roberts already through. Conway's got through. Jake Boswell going up the inside. The lights flashing in a blaze for John Racer. On deaf ears, though, I'm afraid, as now he's lost 3 more spots.
I think the flasher button is just wedged in on a Racer's car. You can see how much he's working the wheel through the penultimate corner of Coram into Murray's running the board here with the helmet cam. You can see how much arm movement's going through the McLaren. He's just soaring at the wheel, trying to keep it on the straight and narrow. I really wish we could see what the pressures on that car were up to. Just keeping an eye on Martin Ulrich's progress at the back. He's running a 152.3 last time by. Race leaders are on a 153.1 as John Racer goes wide there. Nico Kumpu with a 154.5, a Verstappen 154.5. So Ulrich is the quickest car on the field at the moment, but he's going to soon hit a wall of traffic if he's not too careful. So your eyes on the BMW to see where he can progress, but I don't think these guys are going to be able to stay out for this long, Jesse, on these dry tyres. Of course, rain getting worse again. It already looks terrible through the windscreen of John Orator. A lot of spray being kicked up. There's definitely still a dry line on the circuit, but I don't know how many more laps that's going to last for at this rate.
I don't think you can come in, John. I just don't think so. I think if you were going to come in, you would have made that decision in the first couple of laps, and that would have been fine. It would have put you to the back, but with an opportunity to make up spots. But I don't think you can come in now, as Richard Phillips has some contact there, sending one of the Lamborghinis around. Or, well, Phillips was the car that got sent around, I should say, if they're all fighting in the mid-pack. But you've made your bet at this point. You're not coming back in. Conway, Blake looking to the inside of Phil Roberts. Roberts gave him the outside, just enough room, nothing doing there. Diamond off the corner that time did Harry Conway, but still unable to make the move. Jake Boswell has completely caught up to the back of that group and now has lost it through bomb hole this time. The car very much sideways. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen how much wheel input's being made, both into the turn and away from the turn. That is what the conditions require as they continue to deteriorate. Battle for second place. Verstappen got around pretty much Kumpu, but then slid out into turn one. Here comes Jordan Daly from fourth place. He backs out of it. Way wide, Christoph Verstappen in Montreal. Jordan Daly takes P3. That is incredible, an unfortunate, frustrating lap. Poor Verstappen did all the right things, and at the 0 hour, got on the extremely wet line and lost all control.
It's just great to see, isn't it, how, patient driving really pays off in these conditions. Jordan Daly behind Verstappen since the green flag essentially dropped and just waited for his moment, and that was it. Around the outside, tried Verstappen, didn't make it work, slid out wide. Daly with an excellent run through turn one, up into the Montreal hairpin he went, and Verstappen just ever so slightly outbraked himself, used all of the track in a bad way. But we're going to have a look through the field briefly there. Phil Roberts currently still on the dry tyre, and he's really making it work on this 720S Evo. Harry Conway breathing down his neck. Fantastic scenes here from the diffuser cam on board the 225 Kaiju racing car, and he's got a teammate behind him of Jake Boswell, of course, in a Kaiju sandwich. Harry Conway is at the moment, so maybe Boswell can channel up to the back of the Lamborghini and make the number 47 a real big nuisance. So Conway's attention diverts from Phil Roberts ahead, focuses on the mirror behind, and then allows Phil to drive away. Of course, he's got Mikov ahead of him. Mikov on the wet tires, I believe, if I'm right in saying. So he should be, in theory, driving away from Phil Roberts, although that looks fairly equal still, Jesse.
Yeah, I'm laughing at Chad. Chad is equating some of the gaps these drivers are going to a dog finding a monochrome of space on the couch. And you know how dogs sometimes, they do not have great spatial awareness, right? And if they fits, they sits, essentially. And even when they don't fit, they sits. So that's kind of the temperature of the race, and I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Verstappen battling for P2, had it for a second, was a nose ahead of Kumpu, now down to P4. Gordon Daly now on the back of Kumpu for P2. He has brought Verstappen back into the fold, and Martin Lawrence had a terrible qualifying, but has stayed out of trouble, and because of that, has entered the top half of the field in the RCI Esports red BMW, the old M6 car from yesteryear. I remember this car from back in the day, though we used to broadcast in black and white. That's how old this car actually is, but he's out there still doing it proud. Could he potentially continue to gain? He's got pretty much everybody in front of him. There's about 2.5 seconds gap between him and the top 10. That's incredible.
Yeah, incredible, especially in these mixed conditions, Jesse, where everybody's running in a train and you know, one minute mistake, one bad drive off the corner, one kind of, you know, standing on the brakes a couple of meters too late, as we saw with Verstappen just a few laps ago. You could set to gain yourself quite a few positions. And just look at the spray now, Jesse. There's no dry line, I think, on the circuit. And I think this is going to get very interesting as John Eraser now gets pulled up on by Martin Lawrence, the big turbo,
He pulls
of
up.
course, of the M6. He definitely pulls up in the BMW M6, you know, famous for the ridiculous BOP it had at Donington Park during 1.8 to 1.9, I believe, before it got nerfed into the floor. And yeah, the M6 still, although like you say, Jesse, an old machine, in the right hands, it can be still very, very capable indeed. And look at the way Lawrence hustles it through Coram and then out of the last corner. And you're going to see the sheer gain here of Martin Lawrence. Oh, Lord,
This isn't fair.
He coming, Jesse.
Oh, Lord, he coming, and he's going to be gone here in about 5 seconds, folks. If you've ever doubted the M6, don't doubt the M6. It's super fast in a straight line. It looks like a steam locomotive, and it drives like one, too. But let me tell you something. You hit any straight with any sort of length, you are going to be one of the quickest drivers to the other end of it. I can guarantee you Martin Lawrence up a spot. Further frustrating John Eraser's day. Speaking of that, we were watching him battle cars that were on dry tires. We're clearly in a wet condition, a medium rain scenario here in the final 10 minutes. And you may be wondering, oh, is that a viable solution, never taking wets in ACC now? Well, the short answer is absolutely not. 2 seconds a lap, if not more, slower than wet tires. So you're asking me, why are they not coming in for dry tires? Well, the simple answer is, if it was an hour race, it's a no-brainer. You come in, you put the wet tires on, you go back out, and you profit. This, though, a 30-minute race, they are betting that there's so many cars out on dry tires that they won't lose enough time to make a tangible difference. And you know what, John? On this day, in these weather conditions, at this racetrack, they've nailed it. I was wrong when I said that wet tires was probably the way to go. I think now they already knew this. In a 30-minute race, this is a viable strategy, though only just.
Yeah, I would say only just, Jesse, like you said. I mean, with the dry tires, of course, you being a lot slower, you still have to find a way past the dry-tired cars, even if you are on wets. And they're not going to make it easy, of course, defending for the championship points and their season ahead, as Jordan Daly still follows Nico Kumpu with Christoph Verstappen breathing down his neck in the Heart of Racing 747. He's going to want to try and get a move on, but Andy Boardman out front on his wet tyres. 5 seconds to the good nearly now, and we've got this pack of dry-tired cars just behind, all fighting for what is essentially the last 2 steps of the podium between them. And remember the early days of ACC, Jesse, when you could use the dry tyres in wet conditions. Just have to overpressure them to about 30 psi, and they tend to hold out for the whole hour stint. So I wonder if some of these guys will just bump the pressures up again, try and get them in the magical pressure window of 26 to 27. Although your temperatures in the Pirellis are going to be at rock bottom right now, and of course hot tires do generate better grip. So the wet would be the favourable option at the moment. But like you say, Jesse, only if you started on them, because the time lost in a pit stop obviously doesn't warrant your switching of the tires. I mean, classic example here of Martin Ulrich pitted on the opening lap, down in P23. He's the fastest car on the track at the moment, but still in P23, still hasn't made any gains. And just look at where he is. He's coming up to Agostini in the middle of the circuit map, and the next train of cars are coming through Williams onto the Bentley Straight. So he's got 7.5 minutes to go, Jesse. I don't think he's going to make up a single position.
Well, what is strange? Oh, Zhao Manso has left the racetrack. Was this assisted? They look like they're by themselves. Turn 1, even in the dry, is a tricky corner. And yep, just some opposite lock there on a wet surface. Didn't miss the line necessarily, just ran out of grip in the Porsche in the wet is what happened right there. But no, the shocking thing here today isn't necessarily that they're out there on dry tires on the wet racetrack. We've seen that before. What is strange is the difference between wet and dry tires. There is some, but as I said earlier, only just. It's not a huge amount. And Harry Conway goes off in the final turn, and that does facilitate a pass there finally. That is not how you're supposed to take Murray's.
To their own, maybe unlocking a new line achieved there by Harry Conway. Back to the fight at the front. It looks like Nico Kumpu has just about got legs on Jordan Daly, although Daly, of course, with Verstappen buried in his rear diffuser.
Oh,
Look at
Daly's
Daly
going
on the
for
brakes.
it!
Big close up on the brakes there. Very confident coming into Oggies before, of course, Williams corner before the Bentley straight. So got to be careful, Nico Kumpu. Jordan Daly, very, very confident there. That's going to be one for him to keep an eye out of and probably cover off in the next lap. Although the straight down the towards Brundle and Nelson, nothing to be had in the slipstream in these conditions, and I'm still amazed that these guys are out on dry tires, really kind of hustling the cars around. Looks like Daly's car is a lot better in the corners, although Kumpu's car comes off the corner that little bit better. So it's a bit of a tit for tat, cat and mouse game, and there's still a lot of moisture in the curbs and the grass, so be very careful, especially if they dial down the traction control. Jordan Daly with a bucket load of understeer through Coram. That's going to allow Verstappen to take the tighter line and set himself up a little bit better for Murray's at the end, although I think Verstappen missed the apex of Murray's, and it's again tit for tat, cat and mouse. Jesse Lee, just over 5 minutes to go, and we've got a yellow flag out for John Aracer. He is back to the garage by the looks of it. That's his race one called there. I think even if he held on, of course, he could have scored some kind of points, but they just going from bad to worse. Through Brundle he goes, over the middle of Nelson, spins out to the inside line, and just parks it and calls it there. Of course, we've got a double header tonight, 2 30-minute sprint races, so I'm sure the drivers that have called it in race one will still be around for race two. Of course, qualifying results are consistent throughout both races, so Martin Ulrich will start on the pole once again for race two, which will begin, of course, after we've seen some split two highlights. And with split two being dry, it should be a walk in the park for the split two guys in comparison to what split one is enduring right now.
Yeah, it is. I'm going to tell you something. When we show these race two highlights, there's going to be a lot of split one drivers that are going to be watching those highlights in the break as well, and they're going to be less pleased than usual to see just how nice split two has been as far as weather is concerned. But this has just been a very interesting race on top of everything. You've got a mix of strategy, different cars, everybody going for it. And here comes Martin Lawrence. Lawrence has already gotten past drivers like Koizma and Hartman, and now sets his sight on Phil Roberts. Here comes the M6. Oh, Lord, he's a-coming and going down to the inside. A little bit of a fade move from Phil Roberts, but nothing too extreme there. Phil Roberts trying to outbrake him on the outside, and he does. Martin Lawrence only able to get side by side, and he retakes him back in Brundle. Very nicely driven there by Phil Roberts, who keeps the spot as Martin Lawrence's car kicks out a little bit. You know, we were watching the battle for P2 earlier on, and I was going to make a comment that Kumpu's pace is clearly not as fast as Verstappen and Daly behind, but that's also brought Tobias Lang back into the fight, who is in 5th place. So it is a four-way battle for P2 here at the end of this race, with Tobias Lang in the 94 McLaren joining that fight. And Martin Lawrence is not done yet, trying to make up this spot still on Phil Roberts, but now just a little bit too far away. And he's got to be careful. He's got Koizma right behind him. He makes too big enough a stake, even if it's not a off-track encounter. Koizma's going to take that spot away from Lawrence.
Yeah, I mean, even if, you know, Lawrence manages to shoehorn open the door on Roberts with the giant barge that is the M6, he could bring Koizma through with him. So Roberts may be losing out 2 positions if the M6 gets close enough. We see Mikov just ahead of Roberts there, outbraking himself into Agostini, running that little bit wider, and that allows Roberts to close up that little bit more on Mikov. And Mikov, of course, on the wet tyres. Phil Roberts still on the dry tyres, and just amazed at how in 1.9 the wet tyres can survive for so long. I mean, like you say, Jesse, if this was a slightly longer event, maybe an hour or so, it would be worthwhile changing to the wets. But look at Martin Ulrich, P22, currently again in Agostini in the middle of the circuit. He's only made up 1 position, I believe, and that would be from John Aracer returning to garage. So realistically, Ulrich hasn't actually made up anything by pitting at the opening lap. Of course, he's had nearly over, what, 27 minutes nearly on the wet tyre, and he's gained absolutely nothing from it. So maybe going to stay on the dry tyres next time. I think if you took the grid, Jesse, on the wet tyres, that was the right call. But if you're on the dries, you're just going to have to suck it up and let it happen as Phil Roberts draws alongside Mikov nearly. And look how close Martin Lawrence is in this
Oh
fight. There's contact.
no!
Phil Roberts rubs Mikov,
Here
and that's
comes
going to allow
Martin!
the M6 through. It's coming. Oh, Lord, he coming. And that
Oh,
brings Nico
Martin
Kuizma.
Lawrence!
That brings Kuizma into the fight as well. He's going to try around the outside of Mikov. We saw what happened when Verstappen tried
Oh
that.
my!
Mikov so
Oh
late
my!
on the brakes, and Kuizma manages to do the old up and under switcheroo, and that brings Phil Roberts now back into it. He's being
Oh, he
defended
blocks
off
him!
into the Montreal hairpin defense from Mikov. He's having none of that. Runs a little bit wide in the second half of the Montreal hairpin, and Phil Roberts is now glued to the back of the Sky Tempesta McLaren ahead. But positions stay as they were between Jack and Phil. Meanwhile, that's allowed, of course, Lawrence and Kuizma through the both of them.
Bill Roberts is probably going to be quite upset with that. The short shoot between turns 1 and Montreal, that was a absolutely filthy block that occurred in my mind. Not particular. Just Mikov was not having it. After the contact, it was not going to let Phil Roberts through. It blocked him all the way down to the grass in the infield, and I laugh about it. They're both mad at each other, but to me, that's hard racing right there. And again, a lot of frustrated drivers. Richard Phillips has gone off. They were running just outside the top 20. Oh yeah, too much curb, then getting the grass. Can't do that in these conditions, I'm afraid.
Yeah, absolutely. The grass retaining a lot of moisture, so are the curbs and painted surfaces. So you've got to be very careful, especially if you're on the dry tyres and you've dialed down your TC to try and get a better run. But look at this, Christopher Streppard through on Jordan Daly. Not sure what happened here, but the checkered flag is out, and that is how it has finished. Andy Boardman, your race 1 winner. Nico Kumpu in P2. Verstappen takes P3 from Jordan Daly, and Tobias Lang in 5th. Thomas Arntrout in 6th. Shelgren 7th, Grim Lilith in 8th, Harry Conway managed P9, Jake Boswell P10, Martin Lawrence 11th, Kuizma 12th, Mikov 13th, Phil Roberts in 14th, Hartman brings up in P15. Then we have a little bit of a delay until the next rung of cars come through. Ted Edwards in P16, Les Stevenson in P17, Tom Watts behind his teammate in 18th, Jackson in 19th. Good gain there. Sven Kunas up 10 positions on where he started. Martin Ulrich, although the fastest lap of the race, unfortunately only managed P21 on those wet tyres. Richard Phillips, 22nd. Tom Shipston, 23rd. I believe Falasca. I think we've still got a few cars finishing, actually. It's not actually set in stone. Phillips comes across the line in 22nd. We're then waiting for Shipston, Falasca, Keller, Stevens, and Barber to come through. Manzo has finished, of course, after the spin in turn 1. Just waiting for everybody now to round the corner. But looks like the top 20 or so are set in stone, Jesse. And of course, we are going to take a look just in a little while at what happened in Split 2. And of course, their championship is still up for contention as well at the halfway point.
Yeah, it sure is. What an interesting race though we had here today in Split One. But here are the championship standings for the Split Two or Silver class, if you would prefer. And right off the bat, a correction: I misspoke when I said that Alexander Vanderwood lost a race win at Donington Park a week ago. What I meant to say was that Vander Kula has been moved to the pro class, I believe, and that has vacated that win. So, with that in mind, these are the current championship standings in the split 2 classification. Mike Redford leads that championship on 128. Richard Withel in second place, 2 points behind. 2 points behind them in third place, George Barr occupies the final step of the podium. Behind them, Martin Foster with 102. Kevin Boss, 1 point off that mark inside the top 5. Daniel Durrett on 99. Joe Dauber on 76. Vander Wuda, who was not penalized last week. I want to make sure I make that very clear, on 72 points. Mac Forrester, 71. And rounding out your top 10, the best first name in sim racing with 52 points. Outside the top 10, still everything to play for. It's close at the top. It's close everywhere. Keith Whittle with 44 points. Tim Ireland on 41. Trevor Byford on 38. Callum Kerrigan, 33 points. Charlotte Robertson inside the top 15 with 30. And you've got uh, Bursky with 24. Texeria on 21. Lloyd on 20. Ellie Douglas has 5 points. Kubacki has 0 points, but it's still active in the championship. And of course, a 0 means they're active, and a dash means they have retired. These drivers have retired from the championship.
They still very much alive, and some great car choices as well in the split two. Of course, we've got the V12 Aston and the old Jaguar as well. And now on your screens here, we have a very much drier looking Snetterton, shall we say. And you see the old machinery there, a
This is
couple of
great weather.
V12s and a Jaguar in the background. Great weather indeed. Mike Redford off to a great start, followed by Kevin Boss in the Lamborghini. Richard Whittle comes with them, of course, down to the Montreal hairpin. Smaller field, so a lot cleaner as they all stand on the brakes, all managed to get tucked up inside very nicely. Kubaki, I believe, in the white V12 just behind there, and Van der Voda was in another Aston Martin towards the back. My favourite car in ACC still. Callum Kerrigan with a relatively clean start as well, up into P. This would be P4 once the timing board, of course, updates within ACC, but a relatively clean start, Jesse Lee, and they've all made it around Agostini unaffected as well. And of course, the scene's a lot nicer here, so the split one drivers are going to be very envious of the conditions had by split two.
They're going to be envious of the weather. They're going to be envious of the close, clean racing as well, if I do say so myself. George Barr trying to make up a spot here and looking, or actually the other way around, Foster trying to make up a spot on Barr and gets that done on the second lap of the race. Up one spot inside the top 5. Oh, but there was contact there. More cars involved. Is that Byford that got a piece of it? No, that's not Byford that got a piece of it. I don't know who that Ferrari is there. Was that Lee Kettle?
I think it's Lee Kettle.
962 got a piece of that action as well. One lap later on lap 3, George Barr making up some of those spots they lost in the altercation there in Montreal, trying to get by Charlotte Robertson. Barr trying to do it the hard way, going the long way. Charlotte Robertson kind of facilitated that a little bit, dragging the brake, or maybe not getting back on the throttle as aggressively down the inside, letting the championship contending 202 car through there for the moment.
Keith Whittle now behind. I believe this is Charlotte Robertson in the Lexus live timing. A little bit still glitched after
read that team name.
Whittle's Whizzers?
Is that Weezers or Whizzers?
Whizzers, as in to whiz, as in to go really fast, I guess.
Whizzers sounds like a name that you would call a particular group of people, you know, from different places. You know, you have different names to name people.
Yeah, I know what you mean, like Manchester people called Mancunians, etc.
I was thinking more of like Brummies and Scousers, but yeah, keep going.
That's a Renault Laguna livery, I'm pretty sure I'm seeing right here on Tim Ireland's car. It is indeed, isn't it? It's great to see the BTCC liveries kick in here as well, even down in split 2, where we don't see the Kaiju cars as much. But Tim Ireland sponsored by vegetables, it seems, with snip peas and cabbage.
Vegetables.
Remember to eat your 5 a day, I guess. But Richard Whittle for Whittle's Whizzers at the front of the field, the 957 blue kind of chrome shiny Lamborghini. Kevin Boss goes very wide at turn 1, taking the rallycross line, and that allows Richard Whittle up the inside, although Kevin Boss looks like he's trying for the switchback maneuver, but nothing to be had out of Montreal. But very good overtake, and it just proves, Jesse, in these 30-minute sprints with everybody pushing so hard, patience is key, because you never know what the guy ahead of you is going to end up doing with their own race.
No, you're absolutely right about that. It's easy, too, in Sector 1 to get overconfident here at Snetterton and throw the car off the racetrack. Just a momentary lapse of judgment there for Kevin Boss. Takes away a potential P2 spot for the time being. Meanwhile, a little bit further back in the pack, it is the V12 Aston, the most beautiful sound, but they're going to be in one of the worst positions, being spanned around. Vanderwood and Foster getting together. That will not wash, certainly, for either of those drivers. Certainly mad based on that. Joe Dauber has done a really good job so far in this race, nearly inside the top five in the Jaguar, but looks to be going just a little bit too wide and too much curb in the Nelson. And Trevor Byford bringing the Dad 505 Audi inside the top six positions. Actually, yes, top six positions, doing well there. Just that's all it takes here at Snetterton. Some of these curbs quite large. Some of these turns are faster than they appear. You get in trouble in a hurry. George Barr continuing to march back up through the field, trying to make up some spots here, but gets it all wrong when trying to make a pass on Tim Ireland, and that's going to allow Foster to get by them. They come through Bombhole and Corum this time. Or is it done and dusted? Still side by side into Murray's corner. A little bit of a tap now between the two cars, Barr and Foster, side by side down the straight. That battle's certainly continuing, and it's continuing right now.
Yeah, continuing into the latter half of the lap through Oggies and Williams out into the Bentley straight. A big mistake there from Foster ahead. The bouncing donkey prances again.
Pardon
It's
me?
no prancing horse on that one, nicknamed by Sir Foch, the old Ferrari 488, known as the bouncing donkey among them. And you just see here on board with Martin Foster. Let's watch the wheel movements. It's going to be a very big armful of opposite lock both ways, back the other way, back the
Oh,
other way
no.
again before facing the Armco, and a heavy impact on the front of the 296. Loops it round, manages to keep it going. And of course, in a sprint race, Jesse, there's no point returning to garage. You might as well just kind of limp the car around and see what you can salvage. Of course, Alexander van der Voorde in the V12 Aston behind in the standings at the moment. And Foster, I believe, may have even retired to the pit lane. And a big bounce
Oh,
for Whittle as well. Just look at the way the Lamborghini bounces through. I believe that was a corner before Oggies, if I'm right in saying that was
that was
through
Hamilton, I'm pretty
Hamilton,
sure.
yeah, and caught too much curb and just fired the car off nearly to drivers right. Kevin Boss with some very good driving had a choice of which way to go and certainly chose the right way. And just look at the legs that Kevin Boss managed to get over Whittle in the end. George Barr and Tim Ireland still going at each other. This is down into Oggies that we saw earlier on. George Barr on the inside sets himself up for the next corner. Of course, the right-hander of Williams gets the inside line for that one as well, and cleanly gets through our very own RCI Tim Ireland. Of course, your event manager for Mondays at the moment. So any feedback, please do direct to him. But I think this has been a fantastic championship so far, Jesse, and it's even great seeing the split two guys, of course, get onto the broadcast with a small highlight reel. And Mike Redford, of course, through Coram into Murray's would be your race one victor over in split two. Just drove away, did almost a Stan van der Kolen, and just cleanly drove away from the green. A little bit of contest from Kevin Boss, although it looks like in the background Richard Whittle managed to find his way back through on Kevin Boss. I think the timing board on the left is slightly glitched out, but that's definitely the Richard Whittle Lamborghini in front of Kevin Boss, if my eyes aren't mistaking me.
He did it on the last lap, John. He did it coming to the flag in the final sector on the final lap. Whittle gets by Kevin Boss in incredible fashion. A back and forth battle for P2. Mike Redford extends his championship lead in the split two championship. Boss gets a little bit of redemption, probably would have liked second place, but what about Whittle? Whittle did an excellent job in the 957 to come all the way back after that huge slide. A little bit of redemption for George Barr as well. Got many of those positions they lost back. And dare I say, some ruffled feathers and some ruffled feelings in split two with some of that hard hitting side by side action. But a good race nonetheless, and some fantastic podium finishers and some fights indeed. Egg.
Mushroom on the bottom of the door. Phil's fruit and veggies and cabbage. So yeah, remember to eat your greens at home. Remember, be big and strong when you grow up and be a
Oh,
race
it's
car
an
driver.
anime again.
It's a single and not hidden this time like we had in the world tour.
No, no, no. That's very prominent on Charlotte Robertson's car. We can I'm pretty sure our broadcaster knows what that is, but to me, it's just an anime.
And single anime indeed, Jesse Lee. And great to see Great to see some, of course, custom liveries working their way through into the RCI Championship, and plenty of custom liveries we had on the World Tour stage as well. It's great to see everybody's kind of creative juices flowing when the championships arise.
Well, I can tell you this, bringing an update to the weather. I don't know what the weather is going to be in split one. I'll leave that to John Dalton. He'll tell you what it is when we arrive back at the racetrack. But I can tell you in split number two, the weather is wet. It is light rain, and it's going to lessen and completely stop before the end of the race. But it is a wet racetrack for the start of race number two in split two. John, I'm quite curious. What is our weather going to be like here in split one?
Yeah, I've got a little bit of an insight, and I'll kind of say it is, let's just say it's flipped servers on the weather. So, split one at the moment, looking dry currently and for the next 10 minutes and 30 minutes as well, as we now cam to the circuit. Of course, the clouds still overhead, although no rain should be coming out of them. Hopefully, for the remainder of race two. 18 degrees in the air, 24 degrees on the track. So, it's going to be perfect conditions, I would say, for these Pirelli tyres to keep cool and put out plenty of grip. A very different offset to what was race one. Of course, Martin Ulrich going to have to mentally reset and see if he can drive the McLeod Racing Team car away from Andy Bourman and maybe even bring the sister BMW of Falaska with them as well. BMW Ferrari on the first two rows of the grid, and then we've got a big gaggle of those McLarens, and we know how quick they can be as well in race trim, Jesse Lee.
Yeah, this is completely flipped on its head, and I think a lot of redemption being taken place here in race number two in split one. I think a lot of these drivers are going to relish this opportunity to get some dry running in. Of course, they had a whole week to practice. They would have been mixed conditions, talking and listening and overhearing some of the drivers prior to today's race talking about practicing in the wet and also what times they were expecting to do in the dry. But the overarching thing for them was you practice for the wet, you hope for it to be dry because that's where most drivers feel more confident. And I think you're going to see, as aggressive as race number one was and as many accidents as there was, I think you're going to see the aggression in this race dialed up to 11 a little bit. You're going to see a lot more control of the cars, though. You're going to see some fender banging. I think you're going to see nearly as many wrecks. But hey, I'm just a broadcaster. I've been wrong before. A couple of cars looking for some redemption here. Of course, none more than Martin Ulrich out in front of this field right now.
Yeah, fingers crossed the Dane can get it done in race two and set some blistering times as he did in qualifying. Of course, track conditions are optimum for those wondering on the grip levels at the moment. They are not fast, they are not green, they are perfect for the race. So fingers crossed we should have no people struggling because of tyres. But it's going to be a half an hour sprint race as was race one. So who can stand the test of time, have a mental reset and really get the hammer down. Just a quick calendar reminder for the rest of the season. Of course, round 5 next week, we head to Spa and we're back to the traditional 1 hour sprint races. Brands Hatch and Donington then take rounds 6, 7. And of course, the pit stops, the mandatory stops are back as of next week. Jesse, we do have, I believe, the standard kind of mandatory stop, 1 litre of fuel to add. That's in a 30-minute pit window. So a format that most drivers are much more familiar with. Whether or not weather will play a part in that, we will have to see. Of course, Tim Ireland always likes to throw a curveball, and we even had names of Wetterton being thrown about tonight by many of the drivers in the chat, and I thought that was very good play on words there.
Oh dear. You know, Snetterton is a divisive racetrack. Some say that it's a poor GT racing circuit. Others will say that it's probably one of their favorites because of the flow and the different sectors being completely different than the others. And a lot of the sentiment I hear for the negative side is it's a better motorbike track than anything else. For me, I've enjoyed success around this racetrack. I think it's fine. I enjoy most of Britain's racetracks for what they are, and this is a very interesting place because it's got modern amenities but old-fashioned racing, and that's why you see so much side by side. You see so many cars, so many drivers, in fact, getting their elbows out around here. I enjoy watching racing here simply because it is a driver's racetrack in the respect that if you make a mistake, we saw it in both splits and the highlights. that if you make a mistake, you can come back from it, but also if you don't make mistakes, you can clear yourself and have a really great race. We saw Redford do the same thing, didn't put a foot wrong. He had a 5-second gap halfway into that race. Saw the same thing here in split one. Just not making mistakes gains you a ton of time, and it's just a lovely venue for that. Not a lot of racetracks boast the ability to say that it's a racer's racetrack and you have to race the most of the time you sort of mow over the track and you're racing the other competitors. Here, you have to respect the tarmac, you have to respect the walls, and I think that's great for the racing track. If I had to choose, though, driving or broadcasting, I'd pick broadcasting simply because as much success as I've had here, I've also been flipped over into Nelson before, and that's not.
Absolutely so. Not fun indeed. And I've had a few successes here at Snetterton as well, but for a circuit, I do not enjoy driving. Funnily enough, even though somehow managed to win a championship round with the British GT here, it's very strange indeed. But I'd much rather be
John
up in
Dalton's
the
good
booth.
at tracks he hates.
Yeah, I am. Zandvoort is another one. Absolutely hate Zandvoort, but had good success there. So it's a very strange concept. I don't know what it is, but somehow it just works. But these guys here today have stood the test of time in race one. Mixed, tricky conditions. It's going to be a lot easier for race two, of course. Dry for the next half an hour on our weather forecast. Hopefully no curveballs in the gate for this one. Track is optimum, 18 degrees in air, 23 degrees on the track, and a very low wind speed indeed. Martin Ulrich at the pole position, left-hand side of your screen. Andy Boardman on the right, race one winner. Ulrich's going to want to flip this one on its head and get a much better start than that Ferrari on the right-hand side of your screen. Velasco looking very racy behind the sister BMW, and we are green for race two here at Snetterton. All the cars now side by side. Looks like three wide, nearly in the background there with Verstappen and Keller, although everybody filtering down to two abreast and a little bit cleaner than last time. A big wiggle from one of the dropping the hammer cars, I believe, as everybody now steams into Montreal. Be sure to get your braking point right. Three wide in the background, three into one will not go for the next corner, so hopefully everybody can single themselves out, at least go double file, maybe play it that a little bit safer. Everybody around turn three of Palmer, a lot safer than last time. No real big one. Everybody still condensed together on the map, but Agostini is where it went wrong big time last time. Let's see who can stand on the brakes in time. Everybody looking relatively clean towards the front of the shot. Nobody turned around. Nobody parked on the apex this time, although curse of the commentator, that's Ted Edwards, Manzo, and another McLaren involved. Everybody splitting around the outside. Martin Lawrence on the grass in the M6 manages to stay alive as well, but a couple of casualties. It's curse of the commentator. Stewie flies back to the front. Martin Ulrich out in front. Velasco close behind, and Andy Boardman sniffing at the bit of Velasco.
I believe I saw Aaron Jackson get the worst of that. I know that didn't look like it considering Ted Edwards was turned into the wall, but I believe I saw the 99 get the worst of that, and they have retired from the race. So Aaron Jackson out of the race two here in split number one before it ever really began. They made it the better part of half a lap before it all kicked off, and I will say this, that was one of the most realistic accidents I have ever seen in a simulator. That looked like that could have happened in real life. The way that car got turned slowly and they just sort of slid off the racetrack. Usually accidents in ACC, they happen incredibly quickly and violently, but that was a slow churning accident. Many other cars that were able to escape that, quite lucky indeed, as that could have been absolutely gnarly. Looking for potentially three wide here. Verstappen gets the drop on Keller. Daly looked down to the inside, couldn't quite find the room. Will we see it here? No, Keller back out in front. Verstappen now looking for a weakness, probing, trying to get down to the inside of Palmer. He cannot do it. But here's Jordan Daly. How is he doing this? Around the outside of Palmer is slowed up. Verstappen maybe. Daly trying to take this away from him. Will Verstappen press the issue? You bet he will in Agostini. And they're still side by side. This is why I love calling races at this racetrack. Daly's able to do it before they get to Hamilton. And Verstappen says, you know what? Maybe I'll have an opportunity later on. Ducks back in line. And Keller survives that onslaught. That was looking like Keller was dead to rights, and somehow it's Verstappen that gets past.
Yeah, just having a quick look back here on the replay. Watch the car in the middle. The Porsche gets turned into the sister Porsche there by one of the McLarens. Looks like either Tom Watts or Les Stevenson. I don't want to kind of assume, but possibly Les by the car we came back out on there. Manzo has been back to the pit lane to fix some damage. Barber was the other orange and blue McLaren caught up in that one as well. So a bit of a rocky start for a few guys, but everybody else seems to be relatively intact. Christopher Streppen slipping back even further. Thomas Ehrentraut now past him in the 999, and just behind him he's got his teammate of Hartmann, and that brings with him Shelgren and an angry train of cars. Jesse, look how everybody is condensed in like just outside the top 10 there.
Yeah, it's not been a good start for Christopher Streppen. He's lost a couple of positions there on that lap. Got to get your head back in the game, and you've got to regroup. The wet part of the race number 1 worked to their favor, but the dry race 2, he's been caught a little unawares here. And oh no, it's a big crash right behind them as Hartmann and Shelgren take each other out. I have no idea how that started. I would imagine a tire in the grass, something like that, but that was a huge accident. The cars in front of them completely unaware of what's just happened, but it was coming at you live in 3D. Oh my goodness, just an absolute clattering together between those two cars. Shelgren parked on the inside, attempting to let the other car back through. But that was a scary moment to see unfold live. Everything was completely normal, and then it wasn't in Montreal.
Yeah, it looked like Shelgren just kind of outbraked himself ever so slightly and just had nowhere to go other than the back of the McLaren. The Streppen was very lucky to not be caught up in that. And I just want to touch on something, Jesse Lee. At the beginning of that replay, there was a BMW off at Montreal as well. That's Velasquez. He's all over the grass again coming out of Williams. I'm not sure what's up with the number 32. Maybe we can get a little bit of a race replay here. Down into, this is into Oggies, of course, before Williams. So this is after the BMW had the off in Montreal. Hooks a little bit of the inside curb. There is a little bit of a weird drop off there on the inside. Hits the drop off, fires himself wide, snakes it over the exit curb. Very well held there, but there comes the train in the background, of course, headed up by Grim Lilith. Grim has managed to find a way past Velasquez, and now it's going to be Jake Boswell, the next car to size up. Velasquez race has just gone from bad to worse. You know, we saw it in race 1, Jesse. You've got to be really patient, really calm in these 30-minute sprints. You overdrive the car, and this is what can happen. Velasquez gone all the way from P3, I believe, all the way down to P9 now, and he's got Jake Boswell sniffing at the back.
Pretty sure Velasquez was P2 at some point, John, as well. I think they had made it up to P2. They were able to beat Boardman off the start, and if they weren't, they certainly were P3. Oh, and it's bumper cars here, I'm afraid, in turn number 2. 3 and the 1 doesn't go like you say, and it didn't go on that occasion. The lights ablaze, flashing on several of the cars, frustrated with the moves and the impatience of some of the drivers. Jake Boswell trying to lead this group by, especially their own teammates. Oh, but a scary moment there. Phil Roberts was looking down to the inside in Agostini and had to pull out of that move lest he hit his teammate. Grim Lilith continues to lead Lang now. And, Grim Lilith does lead Lang. Velasquez, the cork in the bottle, trying to get their sorts all back in line and get back on with the race is Luca Velasquez. It was a terrible lap for them. They've got to put that out of their mind and keep going. Just in front of them, of course, Ulrich has a 1.5 second lead over Boardman. 1 second back to Kumpu, Keller, and then Daly makes up your top 5. But for how long? Verstappen now has regained control of the car. They've regained composure, and they're able to make a move on Ehrentraut. But then Ehrentraut, with the door open at the exit of Nelson, took a look up the inside, but very wisely backed out of it into the bomb hole. John Dalton, it's kicking off, and it's kicking off here. Jordan Daly trying to take P4 away from Nicholas Keller. A bit sloppy in execution, perhaps, into Murray's, but take us through it. What happens here?
Yeah, it looks like Daly gave the flash of the light saying, look, I'm coming. Keller parked his car in the middle. Keller wasn't giving that up, and rightfully so. Daly shoehorned open the door, found his way past with the elbows out, and Keller with a flash of the lights on the exit there. Not too happy about how that move was conducted, as you say, Jesse. A little bit kind of clumsy from Daly almost to, assume that the position was going to be given up. Of course, everybody fighting here in split 1 for overall honours. There's no silver, there's no AM in this race. It is just a field of pro guys all fighting for one championship You know, sometimes at RCI we combine the splits of 1 and 2, and you get the kind of silver drivers hustling the pro drivers about, but not in this case. Everybody here in the same category, and Daly definitely wanted that place, and wanting the place now is Tobias Lang on the back of Grim Lilith, just looking from the rear wing of the Kaiju 115 Mercedes. There's a little bit of a Kaiju train going on here. We've got Tobias Lang in the middle, but then we've got Boswell and Roberts behind on that one. And speaking of Kaiju, Shelgren is now up into, I believe, P21 after a move up at Agostini. It looks like Sven Kunas gets very close in the background in the other Lamborghini, and Harry Conway just behind that as well. Conway all the way down to P23, Jesse. Not sure what happened to him in the opening race either.
Yeah, it's not been a good race for Harry Conway thus far, looking to replicate what they were able to do in race number 1, but it hasn't come off. And oh yeah, that'll do it. That's not what got them back as far as they are, but certainly didn't help matters at all back in 22nd place. Very strange place to see Conway. That's very unusual, especially after their strong performance in race number 1. You know, Jordan Daly made the pass on Keller, my 2 cents on that was Keller broke where the Ferrari needed to brake, but Daly knew that he could brake the McLaren later, and that caught him unaware, and he had to dive down the inside. He probably didn't think he was going to make a move in that corner, did Daly, but he might have not been afforded that opportunity. It was either hit him or go down the inside, and it looked like a very aggressive move. Maybe it was or it wasn't, but the Speed Juice Fastest Lap of the Race award is Daly's, currently the fastest car on the racetrack. Martin Lawrence, I'm going to tell you something, folks. Doesn't matter if it's dry or wet. That M6 has the most horsepower and grunt in a straight line, and it's using it right here to get by some of the Kaiju cars.
Yeah, he's pulling up there, isn't he, on Phil Roberts with no real sweat on the much newer machinery, of course, the McLaren 720S Evo, really struggling with the horsepower side of the M6. Harry Conway up the inside of Andre Hartmann into Agostini, Lamborghini on the inside, and Hartmann around the outside. This could give Shipston the inside line into Hamilton, although Shipston doesn't get a great drive off the corner and slots back into P22. He's got to be careful. Sven Kunas behind him, and it looks like a slower McLaren ahead. This could be Shelgren in the 294, and it is for Kaiju Racing. Conway are now around the outside into Williams, heading on to the Bentley straight, although Shelgren elbows out, gives the hip and shoulder to Conway. Conway goes wide, lets 2-3 cars through. Sven Kunas nearly gets collected. Ted Edwards now steaming up in the Porsche. This is live pictures, Jesse Lee, on this one. This isn't a replay. This is happening right now. So Harry Conway's race going from bad to worse, being shuffled down a few more positions, now down into P24 overall.
That threw me for a loop there, because that looked exactly what happened to Harry Conway in the replay. I just thought we were seeing a longer version of that as he was free falling through the field, but no, 2 separate occasions has happened, and one car's gone completely off. It's Andre Hartmann in the Limitless Speed car. They have completely exited the racetrack, exiting Bomb Hole, and they didn't make it to Coram, and they haven't made it around to complete the lap. They have retired that car to pit lane. I wonder if that was a mechanical fault on the 55 McLaren, because that just looked odd.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe a hardware failure again. We've seen it once already tonight, of course. Hardware very prone to failure sometimes, but if your wheel deck is, of course, failing you, you can check out our affiliate link in the description below for Fanatec, where you can pick up a brand new unit and maybe not suffer so much. And of course, a shout out to all of our partners here, RCI, including AK Esports, Driver61.com, DigitalMotorsports.com, and of course Go Setups. All their links down in the description below. If you feel like they can help you out at all, please do go and check them out. And alongside that, you can also find the RCI links that are needed. And I think that was a very smooth transition back into the Shield Wars, Jesse Lee.
I don't think anyone noticed how smooth that was, and if you want smooth braking, you've got to get you some of those pedals from Fanatec. They come in many different varieties, and there's many different availabilities. You can have 2 pedals, 3 pedals. Harry Conway is finding the brake pedal and the retirement pedal, because they are coming into the pit lane after that most recent off. Something very much amiss on that car, but nothing will be amiss on your car. Get some of the fantastic pedals, or a direct drive base, or a wheel. Why not? Get the whole lot over at Fanatec.com. They still offer the $199 direct drive base when it's bundled with a rim and a set of low fan. Recommend the load cell with the clutch because I still race with a clutch. And you can find that at the link in the description. And some of these drivers here in the mid pack, they can use a little help with racecraft. John, do we have anything that can help them with that?
I believe driver61.com could help them, and Daly might want to
What
hit them up
happened
as well.
here?
Let's have a look what happened. Out of the Montreal hairpin, he comes down into the next corner, which is Palmer, patches the grass, and spins the triple R McLaren around. Daly's going to be kicking himself and maybe kick himself all the way over to the driver61.com website, where you can, of course, get 25% off your driver coaching by using our discount code with a link in the description below. From one-on-one coaching to full driving courses, the folks over at Driver 61 will sure have something that fits your need and have helped thousands to hone their skills and discover unknown potential. And this man here, Christopher Streppen, up the inside of Keller. He goes down the Bentley straight, gets side by side, maybe a little bit of a rub through Brundle and Nelson, not too sure. Keller definitely down a position, although no flash of the high beam, so no real dissatisfaction. Maybe thought all was fair game on that move. Christopher Streppen now up into P4, Keller down into P5, and Christoph can now set himself up for the next run, which is Nico Kumpu. As you see a little bit of Nico Kumpu's dust there in the front of the shot from the last corner. We're nearly halfway through the race. Can Christoph gain any more? He's got a very big gap there, Jesse, to catch up to now.
Yeah, he certainly does, but now he's done for the time being the hard part. He's got 15 minutes left to go. There's no panic here. Streppen's running a fantastic race. It's just unfortunate the folks he's racing in this championship, like Boardman, just happen to be in front of him, but he's got to know he's got half the race left to go. He's got a fast car. He knows what he needs to do, and he's just got to get on with it now. Continue to gain some of the spots back. Was it a frustrating start to the race? Yeah, you got to get your head back in the game. Streppen knows that. He's smart enough to know that there's enough time, and he should be quick enough to catch up, but we will see. Not being able to pull away from Keller and Aaron Trout right behind him as he's being absolutely stalked for that fourth place position. Sven Kunis is being stalked as well, but this time by Ted Edwards, who was spun on the opening lap of the race. They've recovered just a little bit. They've got Les Stevenson, who's also involved, I do believe, all beating down the back door of Sven Kunis for Last Turn Motorsport.
Yeah, Sven Kunis, of course, started towards the back of the grid, although he managed to pick his way through all of the chaos. And Ted Edwards, I think, wants that position back, looking very racy through Hamilton and now into Oggies. And, of course, Williams before trying to set the Porsche up for the Bentley straight. We know the Porsche struggles that a little bit in straight line, so Ted's going to have to use the drive off the corner to see what he can really do. And Jordan Daly with the fastest lap of the race to his name, 1:46.255. And he's going to have to drill some more of them in, Jesse, if he wants to make up some of those positions he's just lost from the spin. As I say that, Andy Boardman steals the fastest lap of the race away. Still Martin Ulrich out front, 1.6 seconds to the good on Andy Boardman, who has a 2.7 second gap to Nico Kumpu. Christopher Streppen a whopping 5 seconds down the road, although he's got Pella still breathing down his neck before a little gap to Verlaska. Tobias Lang about another second down. Grim Lilith another second down on that. Brings Jake Boswell very close. We see that on the screen right now. The Kaiju number 47 car. Bit of Kaiju on Kaiju action. Hopefully there's no friendly fire like we saw last time out at Donington, because that is the worst thing to happen. Hopefully the debrief went quite well after Donington and everybody realized where they went wrong, and most importantly probably learned a lesson of not to kill your own teammates.
Yeah, I saw a little bit of the aftermath of that, and there was a joke floating around of "So the Civil War begins," and I thought that was quite funny. And they were making light of the whole thing, and I was like, it's pretty good when you have team camaraderie like that, where you can sort of make light of a situation and you know, move on. But it was funny that they acknowledged it in a private manner, and we're like, oh, okay, so this is how it starts for us. They're creating their own cinematic universe, you know. We'll see how that turns out. So far, no major contact between teammates here today. Richard Phillips in the middle of the pack for RPMS Sim Sport, trying to make up a spot on Stevens in the 77 Aston directly in front, but they've got Kuzma right behind them. All three of these cars racing each other quite nicely at this stage, keeping it all together, but trying to gain ground. Certainly, Stevens doesn't look like they're struggling for pace necessarily. It just looks like Phillips has a little bit extra, I would probably argue, a little bit extra turn in ability by the looks of what we're seeing right here. Well, it's been an eventful day. There's going to be a lot to debrief, I think, for the team, so for us today here, based on what we've seen. A lot of comers and goers. Falaska inside the top 6 again. Remember, they started well up the grid, fell back, and they did this, the first race. They've done it in this race as well. The only difference is they've been able to recover quite nicely. Nico Kuizma trying to go around the outside of Montreal. That is an incredible pass if they're able to pull that off. Unfortunately, they are not. Got all the way alongside, but the inside prevails for Phillips there. They go back single file. Phillips didn't even really lose any. Nobody lost any time there to Stevens as they're still line astern. Though if they don't get a move on, Shelgren and Tom Shipston are going to catch them. They're only about a second behind.
Yeah, so kind of, perfect driving from, I would say, from Kuizma and Phillips. Phillips knew he had lost the run out of turn 1, went immediately defensive into 2, made Kuizma go around the outside. Of course, Phillips got the better drive off the corner. Kuizma equally got a good drive from going wide and managing to nail and throttle that a little bit earlier. But like I say, nobody really lost time to Stevens ahead. The gap is still kind of line astern. RPMS flying formation at the moment. And again, we don't want to see any friendly fire from these two. So hopefully everybody keeps it clean. But Kuizma definitely looks like the quicker car on this train at the moment. Phillips jumps over the inside anti-cut, and we did say about this earlier on, Jesse, in the qualifying, briefly touched on it. Got to be very careful of that curve on the inside. It's gigantic. It does really upset the car unless you're in something big and boaty like an M6 or an M4, maybe even a Bentley, if somebody has been brave enough to choose it in the other split. You can get away with it. But these mid-engined cars with the low-down splitters at the front, they are typically very upset by any kind of big undulation and bump. And Phillips hits it, loses out of position to Kuizma. That now allows Kuizma up to the back of Stevens. He's now no longer a rear gunner for his teammate. And of course, Shelgren managed to sneak through as well with some front-end damage. Mikov at the moment on Earntrout. This is a fight we weren't expecting to see, I don't think. The limitless speed driver ahead coming not so good off the corner. This allows Mikov around the outside into Agostini. McLaren on McLaren action. Who will be the last of the late breakers? Mikov still putting up a fight, but Earntrout squeezing over the curb. Not a very gentlemanly thing to do there. Mikov flashing the lights. You could see his displeasure. It's really upset him, and that's allowed now Daly to go through for the Triple R. And I think Mikov very sensibly let Daly go, knowing he's a much, much faster car. Maybe Daly can upset Earntrout and push him off ever so slightly to allow Mikov to catch back up and maybe slingshot through. If Mikov can stay with Daly, it could be an interesting fight indeed.
Yeah, that's what Mikov's hoping for at this point. He's hoping that Daly is going to fly up there and upset Earntrout in some way. Doesn't have to collide with him, obviously. That's not what we're implying. Just merely driving beside them. We've seen many accounts today of cars being stuck sort of side by side for an entire sector. It's not off the cards to assume that could happen at this juncture as well. And that would be exactly what Mikov was looking to do. It's been a nice return for Jake Boswell to sim racing. Hasn't lost a beat, racing inside the top 10 and racing a familiar foe in Grim Lilith for 8th place. Quite interesting. They're all probably communicating together as they are friends off of the racetrack. When the visor goes down, you don't have any friends, but when they're not wearing their helmets, they are friends. I can guarantee you that. No friends here. Earntrout and Daly. Daly looking to squeeze it up the inside, and that does exactly what Mikov wanted to see. Daly's overshot it. It hasn't worked, but it has for Mikov. Mikov's able to convert 2 positions there. Oh, and he gets right off the road again. Earntrout just is not giving anybody any room. Daly was unwilling to back out of that to boot, and that led to contact that could have been a lot worse. And Daly now frustrated, trying to go down the inside to make these passes happen. He's going to V off the corner and try and get Earntrout this time after Agostini, but no, he has to be single file through Hamilton, and this is turning ugly quickly, and this may be personal before we're done here tonight.
Yeah, it's the nature, isn't it, of these sprint races, Jesse Lee. When you take half an hour off the clock, these guys suddenly get panicky, desperate, and go for these big lunges and late moves that usually in a 1 hour sprint race, you'd kind of pace the car ahead, you'd follow him for a few laps, you'd see where you could make it work and then make a move. But of course, in these 30-minute sprints, you don't have the time on the clock to do it. So if you see a gap or an opportunity, you're going to try and seize that with both hands. And sometimes it does end up getting very ugly, as you said, Jesse Lee.
Yeah, again, I don't think there's any malice in what Aaron Trout was doing with either Beekhoff or Daly, and I don't think there's any malice with Daly overrunning the corner. He's just exactly that, trying to get everything that they possibly can, and just a little bit of a misjudgment. That could be a lot of things. That could just be the brakes. It could be the tire grip at the time. It could just be the draft, too, because when you draft somebody around here, it changes your braking point because you are going quicker. Case in point, Jake Boswell trying to go around the outside of Grib Lilith, and something untoward has happened to Thomas Ehrentraut. I dare say more contact. Ehrentraut leading this group, and it was a bump, and that's all she wrote as Thomas Ehrentraut has parked the 999 McLaren. That's not how you wanted that battle to be settled.
Yeah, absolutely not. Daly with the old kind of bump and run going on there, and then caught the front and kind of turned down Trout back the right way. Almost, I would say, for better, but obviously feels a little bit disgruntled there. Decided to, of course, park the car with just under 6 minutes to go. Look to the top right-hand side of your screen. Of course, rain impeding in the next 10 minutes, although the race is over in about 5.5 minutes. So we're going to see, hopefully, a dry ending here as Matt Stevens, we look from the back of his 777 RPMS SimSport car. He's still got Nico Koizma doing a fantastic job of fending off the charging 777 Finnish driver, who brings with him, of course, Shelgren, and then in the background his teammate Richard Phillips with Tom Shipston just behind him. So a little bit of a triple-decker Aston Martin sandwich with 2 McLarens and a Lamborghini involved. And it's great to see, of course, like we say, Jesse Lee, the BOP kind of making it work and still making all of these cars very competitive. Look to the top 5, you've only got 2 of the same manufacturer in there, that being 2 Ferraris of Boardman and Keller. You've then got a BMW, a McLaren, and an Aston in there. So kind of anyone's game at the moment here at Snetterton.
Well, the championship is wide open again as well. Andy Boardman looking to leave Snetterton with the championship lead. Ulrich trying to undo the wrongs and fight their way back in it. Nicholas Kumpu trying to do a similar thing to get themselves back in the fight for the title. But right now, as it stands, Andy Boardman is the man in the prime position to take control of the championship. He's just got to keep this up for the remaining several rounds, and it's all come undone. Shelgren has made contact with the back of Richard Phillips. The RPMS SimSport car has gone a mile off in turn number 1, and something very unfortunate has happened to Rybecki again. Is that another hardware issue for the CLR car?
Yeah, quite possibly a hardware issue.
No, he just
driven off
missed
the
the corner. Oh, and he made it to the fence.
I don't think I've ever seen that fence ever in ACC.
I know it's there, but I agree.
I've
I've never seen anyone make it that far. Usually you spin before you get to it, right? But holy cow.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. Like, you never ever see anybody that kind of far out, like you say, Jesse. And now Jake Boswell sizing up his teammate Grim Lilith ahead, of course. 2 very different cars, 2 different liveries, although still not afraid to fight each other on that one. And Jake Boswell maybe sensibly backing out a little bit of that move, although just under 3.5 minutes to go. He's going to have to get a move on soon, because there's only about 2 laps in it, I would say, if that at all. Nico Koizma still on the back of Matt Stevens. He's going to have to get through the RPMS SimSport driver if he can. The 777 and the 777 battle of the sevens, who will remain victorious on this one. Again, looks like Nico Koizma much more stable through the second to last corner. Of course, going to be suffering with the dirty air kicked off by the Aston Martin. I don't know if he's going to be able to play the patient game here. Matt Stevens, line of stern, very cold. And Les Stevenson off in what looks like Brundle, I believe, coming down the back straight. No cars in sight ahead of him. Brakes for Nelson and just twitches the back and then snaps back the other way. Unfortunately, Les off into the grass. Keeps it out of the wall though, so no damage, and can certainly continue on for the final 2.5 minutes. And Nico Koizma finds a way up the inside of Matt Stevens, the 77. Looks like turn one has been the place to do it. The McLaren with a little bit of a better run, and just look at the car lengths. Nico Koizma's already pulled there. Stevens must have made a mistake into turn one because he looked very cold indeed, suffering the pressure of Nico Koizma for a good, 10 minutes or so now, and lets it go in the last few minutes. Let's have a race replay, Jesse.
Jake Boswell here still trying to get by Grim Lilith, and a little bit of a tap right there. It was close through Brundle a lap ago, and this time through Montreal, just a switchback. Jake Boswell trying to do anything in his power to make this pass happen. Doesn't want to wreck Grim Lilith. Of course, they have to talk to each other outside of racing. So this is not a driver you want to frustrate, or you want to have that awkward conversation with of, hey, I'm sorry I crashed you, and you want to play some games later. It's not a conversation you want to have, and they're trying to do this right. Grim Lilith is defending, but I wouldn't say aggressively defending. Jake Boswell is not sticking his nose where it doesn't belong either. He's just he's probing for weakness. He's doing the opposite of whatever Grim Lilith is doing, simply trying to find clean air, trying to find space, anything that could potentially send him in front. I think clearly Boswell has a little bit more pace at this point of the race, and there it is again. It doesn't go all the way to the right side of the racetrack there, does he, John? He just goes to the middle. He leaves Boswell a lane, but by that point, Boswell doesn't have enough road left to stick it down the inside still, and has to settle for following in line. This is a good battle.
Yeah, good battle again. I mean, it's the classic tit for tat, isn't it? The Grunt and the Mercedes keeping it in the fight versus the cornering of the McLaren. It's again, Grim pulls out of the corners, and then Jake closes right back up when we get through the entry in the mid, and then on corner exit again. Grim kind of pulls away, and all over the inside curve there. Fantastic views from the splitter cam of Jake Boswell in the number 47. But this is going to be the last lap. Jesse Lee, Martin Ulrich crossed the line with about 1 minute 30 to go. So, Jake is going to have to get a move on. And if he wants to do it, he's running out of corners. Not too many left to go. And Martin Ulrich, your race leader as it stands, navigates through the final corner of Murray's. Andy Boardman in the background, 2.1 seconds to the good. Just nothing to be done on the McLeod Racing team, and a flash of the fog lights there as he takes the checker flag. Martin Ulrich takes your race to victory, followed by Andy Boardman just down the road there. Nico Kumpu takes the bottom step of your podium. Jake Boswell tries around the outside, and the rain's coming in, Jesse, but it's not going to be enough to affect the race. I don't think most people are going to be A-OK on this one. Falaska comes in P6.
Oh, no!
Bill Roberts turns around Tom Watts, RCI on RCI action.
But
Bill
there's
Roberts wakes up, but Nico Koizma's going to split up the middle.
Koizma!
Koizma! No, Phil. Phil, what have you done?
Oh, it's all gone wrong. Nico Koizma's trying to use the mobile chicane on the front straight, but he forgets where the pit road wall is, and he contacts the wall. It's heavy damage on the 777, and it all spurred off on the contact off of Phil Roberts's car that was essentially stranded in the racetrack. Koizma was trying to convert the combo shot, and it all went wrong. Don't worry, that accident you just saw was after the flag. I guarantee you, cars spinning off, enjoying the rain just as the race ends. But one thing we can tell you in all certainty, two things we can tell you in all certainty: Andy Boardman is leading this championship with two very strong performances, and John Dalton, Martin Ulrich righted all the wrongs. Vindication, retribution, and redemption for Ulrich, who wins it in race 2.
Yeah, Ulrich with a fantastic drive through race 2, just cleanly got a good start with the BMW Talk, getting it out of the speed limited 70 kph, of course, when the green flag drops, and just kind of drove away from Andy Boardman. Nothing he could do. Of course, Nico Kumpu 3rd, Verstappen 4th, Keller 5th, Falaska 6th, Tobias Lang in 7th, Grim Lilith in 8th, managed to fend off Jake Boswell in 9th, Meekov 10th, Daly all the way down in 11th after that spin. Lawrence got the M6 up to P12. Kudos on that one. Tom Watts 13th. Matt Stevens in 14th. Shelgren 15th. Shipston 16th. Phil Roberts in 17th, followed by Nico Kuizma in 18th. Sven Kunas all the way up to P19 in the end. Ted Edwards, P20. Rebecki, 21st, followed by Phillips. Stevenson, Manzo managed to finish as well. Earntrout, Conway, Hartman, Barber, Jackson, and Eraser all unfortunately retired from race 2.
What a couple of races we've had at Snetterton. I think there's going to be a lot of bent fenders and bent feelings after a race like that, but a lot of the racing was very exciting to watch. Snetterton, a track where you can race each other side by side for a very long time. We saw a bit of that as well. Some good battles up at the top of the field and throughout as well. Can't wait to see Split Two's highlights from what started out at least as a wet racetrack. We'll bring you those in just a moment. But Ulrich's Redemption had pole position and just could not convert it in round number 1. Thought pitting for the wet weather tire was the right strategy. Turns out it wasn't the right strategy. Who would have guessed that? I can't really put that on Ulrich. I would have done the same thing. Didn't really progress after putting on the wet tires either, but rights all the wrongs with that win. And converts it. They were 8th in the championship coming in. They're going to get okay points still in this round simply because a lot of their competitors, John, also struggled and also had one good race and one bad one.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? If you can have a kind of, a good race and a bad race, then it kind of balances itself out, especially if your rival has the same but the opposite way around. But a much different start this time in Split 2. Of course, the heavens have opened, and Mike Redford leads away again, followed by Kevin Boss, who looks very racy going up into Montreal. Nearly gets the overlap, I think, on Redford. He does, gets the snout of the Lamborghini up the inside and nearly opens the door to Whittle if he was a little bit
Oh, look at
closer
this.
as well. Look at that, Kevin Boss to the lead of Mike Redford. Mike Redford down to P2, although it looks like a very solid kind of, decisive wet start for Split 2, I would say. None of this kind of umming and ahhing whether to take dries or wets. Everybody going to be on the wet tire here.
Yeah, it was a full wet start in race number 2 for split number 2. I can confirm that. So, no, are you on the dries? Are you on the wets here? Just good racing for everybody. It looked like a pretty clean start. Nobody being shoved out of the back. Kevin Boss taking the lead, and you've got Whittle in the 957, who is in third, but that's Barr in the background trying to make their spots up, but not before a fight for P2. Whittle and Redford fighting each other for that spot. Redford on the inside sort of facilitated that move, if we're being completely honest. Redford, with everything to lose in that split, being the championship leader, probably doesn't want to get involved in any extracurricular activities, and I cannot blame him. He is the man on the move in that category for the championship at least, and he's already got a win on the cards in this series. So, Boss leads Whittle, leads Redford, the top 3, and that's where it all went wrong. Martin Foster and George Barr, and that is not how you draw that up.
Yeah, so George Barr deciding to turn right on a straight by the looks of it, almost firing himself off into the grass and possibly even into the Armco. I think he might have gone that far. Skip ahead now to Lee Kettle on Tim Ireland. Lee Kettle, of course, in the Ferrari behind Tim Ireland in the vegetable sponsored BMW. Ireland very wide in turn 1. That allows Lee Kettle up the inside for the BDG racing car, the 962, into the Montreal hairpin. Both drivers nicely on the brakes. A lot of room given there, and Lee Kettle promotes himself up into P11. Tim Ireland, unfortunately, down into P12. But it is a great livery, I would say, Jesse.
I'm just
The
going to say
Laguna-inspired
this.
vegetable one.
I got to say this. Tim Ireland is doing for sponsorship for motorsport what Will Smith did for rap music. He's cleaning it up. He's got a defined message, and it's a good message, and it's a wholesome message, and I support Tim Ireland. Eat your vegetables, children at home. It does help you grow and be a strong person. You can grow into your very own John Dalton. John Dalton eats his vegetables. Martin Foster for RP. No kids watch this stream, by the way. RPMS in the 44, trying to make up some of that ground back again and trying to get by Redford, and he has done. He's taken P4 from Redford. So Redford falling down the order, but look at this off of the racetrack, struggling now is Mike Redford. He gave up another spot there to Callum Kerrigan in the 28. So that's going to bring Redford all the way down into fifth or sixth position by this point. For the man who started on the pole, it hasn't come off very well at all. George Barr, the last time we saw the BDG Sim Racing 202, they were off the race course, but now back into contention, trying to get by Byford here, nearly off of the road as they go through the Hamilton section, but Byford allows him past George Barr back into ninth place.
Indeed, Redford, of course, slightly down the grid there. Not what he wanted after, of course, the dominant performance in race one. The weather really catching him out here, and reading the British GT chat. Apparently, towards the end of the race, weather again catching drivers out. You see there, Alexander van der Voda trying to find some standing water in the V12 Aston, jumps over the exit curb, and that allows George Barr to pull alongside into Oggies. Although very wide line around there, there's a lot of moisture on the curbing, and that allows Van der Voda back up to the inside again, and the V12 Aston Martin manages to stay ahead through the twisty stuff, and of course down the straight the V12 normally has the straight line advantage. Skipping forward another lap or two, we
Oh,
see Mike Redford with a stop go 30, Jesse. That must have been for speeding in the pit lane, I'd assume, because if you look at the track, it is drying out. So I'd say if you were on probably wet tires at the beginning, they're going to be screaming out in hot temperatures right now. They're not going to be a very pretty tire to be driving on. So maybe Redford had a pit stop and eventually got caught speeding, and that was his downfall, possibly.
yeah, something was clearly going on with that race car prior to that, and falling down the top five order. And perhaps they did go from wet to sort of drier in this race to probably full dry by the looks of the racetrack as it currently stands. So Redford for Mike Racing gambling, trying to do something other people weren't doing, maybe coming down pit lane, but getting it wrong. Maybe all it takes is a lockup where you're over the speed and then you can't slow down and you're speeding in the pit lane, especially in tricky conditions. The racetrack would be somewhat dry at that point. The pit lane, though, would still be primarily wet. You're just not prepared for stuff like the battle for the win of the race continuing on. Kevin Boss has it. Whittle would like to take it away. Richard Whittle trying to go the long way around the outside, but that allows Foster up the inside. It's a three-way battle for the win of this race, working lap number 16 near the end, as it looked like Whittle was going to have the opportunity, but then Martin Foster came in, taking away P2 and now chasing down Kevin Boss, but Whittle not willing to let that fight go. As they fight for P2, Kevin Boss was able to drive away for the Wheelie Slow Racing team. He's going to be able to convert here and win at Snetterton, a track he was somewhat confident at, but the 31 gets it done in race two.
Fantastic drive there from RCI's very own Kevin Boss from the start of the race. Managed to capitalise on Redford, get up the inside of the Montreal hairpin, and just managed to keep it ahead despite pressures from behind. Foster with a great second race there. Again, we were saying it earlier, Jesse, kind of flipping race one and race two on each other. Flash of the lights there from Callum Kerrigan to congratulate Kevin Boss. I know they're friends outside of racing as well. Got a little sneak peek into the championship standings. They have gone on to the website, of course, are pending stewards, any stewards inquiries, should we say, at the moment. Andy Boardman leads split one overall, and Richard Whittle now leads split two. And of course, we'll have more on that next time. Quick breakdown for you guys here this week at RCI. Of course, it's a very quiet week this week. We've only got Mondays and Fridays to bring you. And Friday, of course, sees our brand new Roulette Mini Championship begin, where you must pick a different car for each round, and the circuit will not be revealed until nearer the race date. No pre qualifying on this one, taking it back to a much more fun format of racing. Round one, of course, took place last week at the Nürburgring, and suspiciously, Benjamin Heilman won, whose idea may have been this championship, Jesse Lee. So we might need to look into that one. Took victory from Christopher Streppen and Joe Dorber as well. You can, of course, join us on Friday for that one. And of course, Saturday saw the World Tour 2023 kicking off with a mammoth broadcast from myself, yourself, Jesse, and Stewie. 7 hours, essentially, of broadcasting for a 6 hour event at Valencia. Split one had Hymo setups take victory in pro from SPHE Motorsport and Small PP Racing. Split two saw dropping the Hammer Racing
Never
win
not funny.
over Nexus Motorsport and Flying Hellfish Traders coming in third. That is shaping up to be a fantastic championship as well. And if you do want to sign up for any events that we do host here at RCI, you can do so over on the website at racerci.com. And down below, you can, of course, find all of our links to our social medias: Discord, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, where you can have a little insight into what does go on behind the scenes at RCI, especially with our esports team following as well.
Well, it's been an interesting day of racing, and we do have the winner of race number two in split two. He also happens to be the man who provides us with our split two highlights. We thank him for that as well, pulling triple duty. He's a streamer, he's a racer, and he's also still RCI staff. So we thank him for that and his time. Ladies and gentlemen, your winner in split two, race two here at Snetterton, Kevin Boss. Kevin Boss, congratulations on winning yet again in RCI. But we'll start with race number one. What
Oh boy.
happened in race number one? You fell back a little bit. Was the pace not right? What was going on with the wheelie slow Lamborghini?
It was basically the entire top three. We were all making like little mistakes here and there, and my final one came on final lap where I went a little bit. I think I must have gone a little bit too much on the inside of what's the left right before bomb hole.
Brundle Nelson?
Could be, yeah. But yeah, I think I just went a bit too much to the left, hit a bump, and that spun me out, and that lost me P2 there. But yeah, Richard Withall and I had been like trading P2 already for a little bit. So yeah, we both made mistakes. We both just apparently didn't want P2 there. But yeah, it was still a good race. Also trying to catch Redford there. But yeah, race two went a lot better.
Race two did go a lot better. Talk us through that. Obviously, you're side by side with Redford on the start. You were absolutely able to take him into Montreal, turn number two. Talk us through your process. How did that come about? And then at the end, how'd you hold off everybody to get that win? It seemed like everybody was coming for you at the end, but you somehow made it out with P1. Talk us through your race.
Yeah, I think at the start, the way my car was like, I think with the pressures and everything, it was still like proper wet. Um, and I was able to pull away, just have a good turn one, and I tapped the speeds against Redford and was able to send it up the inside into turn one. But the more the race dried out, the faster all the other guys. So maybe they had slightly lower pressures that their tires were not as bad later on. But yeah, for me, it was also quite a very quick adjustment because at first I was watching the highlights on the broadcast, and then it's like, oh shit, I've only got 1 minute 30 left to make any decisions pressure wise. So I quickly did something, and yeah, it was very good for the start. But yeah, once it started drying out, really struggling, and then yeah, every time I was just able to keep the defensive line. They weren't able to overtake, and then yeah, especially that sent by Foster in the final lap on Whittle when he tried to overtake me. That was insane. I had no idea where that was coming from.
Kevin Boss, you've now scored 3+ wins in RCI competition. It wasn't that long ago when you hadn't won a single race. What do you attribute your success to?
I guess it's just being able to put a bit more time in. Also racing faster people now. That also elevates your own racing because you can see what they do. You can try and work out what lines they take, where they break, and I think everything together, also with the setups I'm using, all helping that little bit.
I I just I love seeing a driver progress, and you have certainly shown that you've progressed. You were an amateur once upon a time. You've done that. You're in the silver class. You're racing against good drivers that arguably had the split been a little bit different, could have been pro pace, could have been in the pro split, right? Your
Yeah.
progression has been fantastic to watch here at RCI. It's another win for Wheelie Slow. Kevin Boss gets it done. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Well,
So,
John, it's been a fantastic day of motorsport. There's some drivers are left with some explaining to do, but all in all, we got to see 4 good races between the splits today.
yeah, it's fantastic to see again, like you say, Jesse, clean, good racing. Sometimes in places was a little bit heated, got a little bit personal and elbows out. So I'd expect some stewards reports to be coming through. But it's fantastic to see the split two guys also getting their kind of shot on the broadcast. And of course, highlights brought to you by Kevin Boss, who we just had in for interview. So triple header, as you say there, Jesse. Not only a racer, a streamer, but also a highlighter for us here at RCI TV. And of course, you can find more action same time, same place next week when we head over to the continent for the next round at Spa. Whether or not weather will be a factor, we will have to find out. And I, for one, Spa being a bigger track, Jesse, I'd maybe like to see the splits combined and see how the split two guys mix in with split one.
Well, we'll have to see if we continue that tradition. We went to Snetterton, or excuse me, Silverstone. They both start with S, leave me alone. And we did combine the splits. We have enough pit boxes as long as there's not a massive signups. We'll have to see what the mad scientist Tim Ireland has to say about that. But no, just a fantastic race. And once before we go, just a big thank you to all of our partners again that make this race and every race possible, aka Esports Driver 61, Fanatec Digital Motorsports, and Go Setups. You can find all of the links to those fine folks in the description of the video. And when you visit them using our link, it helps us out with things like server cost. We appreciate you doing so.
Absolutely so. And if anybody is looking to get involved with us here at RCI, we do have, of course, a vacancies channel in the Discord. So if you think you could offer some skills to the table, then by all means, please do bring them. And we can never have enough stewards on board. And a few people in the YouTube chat, Jesse Lee, egging us on to combine the splits. So we'll have to give Tim Ireland a poke and see what happens next
The
week on
people have
RCI TV.
spoken,
The
Tim. I
people
know
have
you watch
spoken.
this back. The people have spoken. You can see it yourself. The people have spoken.
People have spoken and they want to see the combined split. So fingers crossed we do get a little bit of a combined split. 'Cause I'd love to see the split two guys at the same time as split one next week. You can of course catch us next time on RCI TV when we head to our Friday Roulette Mini Championship this week. Keep your eyes peeled on the website for the track reveal and remember to lock your car choices in, or I believe they are randomized and chosen for you on that one. But from myself here tonight, John Dalton, from Jesse Lee alongside me, and as always, Stewie behind the cameras, we'd like to bid you farewell. We hope you have a wonderful rest of the week, and we hope to see you once again on RCI TV for another event. Take care.